modern people often ask themselves, why do I have to study history? Well, you're a historical being. You need to know who you are and where you came from and why you think the things you think. That's why you have to place yourself in the proper tradition. I'm taking 4 of my esteemed colleagues and you across the world. Oh, wow, this is amazing. To rediscover the ways our ancient ancestors developed the ideas that shaped modern society.
It was a monument to civic greatness.
To visit the places where history was made.
That is ash from the actual fires when the Babylonians burned Jerusalem from 2,500 years ago.
To walk the same roads.
We are following the path of the crucifixion.
And experience the same wonder.
We are on the site of a miracle.
What kind of resources can human beings bring to a mysterious but knowable universe?
Science, art, politics, all that makes life wonderful.
And something new about the world is revealed.
The Daily Wire has your chance to get DEI certified.
DEI certified, I'm here to help.
Win a trip to the red carpet premiere of Am I Racist?
What's up with white people?
The Daily Wire's first theatrical release in theaters September 13th. Sign up now at AmIRacist.com.
Would you mind signing?
Sign here.
Bonus entries when you share on socials.
What the hell is that?
One grand prize winner will fly to Nashville for the red carpet premiere with Matt Walsh and be the first to see the most offensive, inoffensive movie of all time.
They gonna say you racist.
Am I Racist? Go to AmIRacist.com now to enter to win.
Republicans are Nazis. You cannot separate yourselves from the bad white people.
Growing up, I never thought much about race. It never really seemed to matter that much, at least not to me.
Am I racist?
I would really appreciate it if you
I'm trying to learn. I'm on this journey.
If I'm going to sort this out, I need to go deeper undercover.
They gonna say I'm racist.
Joining us now is Matt, certified DEI expert.
Here's my certifications.
And what you're doing is you're stretching out of your whiteness. This is more for you in this field. Is America inherently racist?
The word inherent is challenging there.
I want to rename the George Washington Monument to the George Floyd Monument.
America is racist to its bones.
So inherently.
Yeah, this country is a piece of
White
folks,
white
trash, white supremacy, white woman, white boy.
Is there a black person around? What's a black person right here? Does he not exist?
They gonna say I'm racist.
Hi, Robin.
Hi, what's your name?
I'm Matt.
I just had to ask who you are because you have to be careful.
Never be too careful.
They gonna say you racist.
Buy your tickets now. In theaters September 13th. Rated PG-13.
Oh, hey, I'm Jeremy Bourne, CEO of Daily Wire and founder of Jeremy's Razors. Woke razor companies love to take your money while trampling on your values. Me? I just love your money.
Cut! What is this? We're filming the commercial for the brand new second-generation Jeremy's razor.
Yeah, I get it. We moved our manufacturing out of China. Plus, with the new Sprint 3 and Precision 5 blades, you can shave like a man, not a manifesto. But who's he?
Customers want diversity. Customers want inclusion. Customers want Black Jeremy.
That's why there's no white people in commercials anymore? Unbelievable. Stop giving your money to woke corporations who hate you. Give it to me instead.
Buy the new radically redesigned second-gen razors featuring sharper, longer-lasting blades and superior durability. Go to jeremy'srazors.com now.
The white participants in the group feel that there's something in themselves that they have to overcome, when all that's being requested of you is that you be. Hello.
Hi.
How are you? How are
Sorry
you?
about that.
Oh, no problem. You good?
Yeah.
Yeah. Remind me of your name again.
Stephen.
Stephen? Yeah? Okay. Did you want to come up?
Come up?
Yeah. Do you want to come up and share anything?
Sure. What do you want me to share?
Whatever's on your mind.
I just want to know that, like, my physical safety and yours and everybody else's here is okay.
Why would your physical safety not be okay? Did I miss something?
I don't feel comfortable.
What? Can you guys catch me up to speed on what's going on here?
You don't need to be caught up. We're going to be silent.
Is it because I said I had 17 black friends? It might have been 15. It depends on how you count them.
I would really appreciate it if you left so that the people who actually want to be here and deserve to be here can get what they need.
I do want to be
Can
here.
you please leave?
I would like it if you left.
I'm trying to learn. I'm on this journey.
Come with me.
Well,
thank you.
I didn't consent to be touched.
I'm not offering to touch you. I'm offering to walk you out. Will you walk with me and I'll answer your questions?
Okay, I'll admit it. My name's not Steven. Maybe you already knew that. My name is Matt Walz.
We know.
I was here on this journey that I'm just starting, but I see that I'm not wanted.
If you were on your journey, then you would have told us who you were, your real name, but you didn't.
Are you saying I needed a better disguise? Is that what you...
I don't know, maybe. But you can figure that out as you walk out the door.
Maybe.
Yeah, maybe.
Thank you so much. I really had a transformative experience myself. And my pronouns are he, him.
I did everything I could to fit in. I opened up. I was raw and emotional. I told them about my black friends. It was no use. They rejected me, and they called the police. My mere presence in the room caused them pain. I'll never be accepted if I look like this. If they know that I'm Matt Walsh, I'll always be an outsider. I need to go deeper undercover, a whole new identity. If I want to be an ally, I need to look like one. Like someone who is progressive, tolerant, enlightened. Let me think. Have I ever met anyone like that? Ah, yes. Yes, I have.
What is a woman?
Why do you ask that question?
Racist. Rated PG-13. Buy tickets now.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to Night 3 of Election Wire DNC Edition. I am Daily Wire Senior Editor Cabot Phillips, joined by the wonderful Michele Tafoya, host of the Michele Tafoya podcast. You also might recognize her from all of her years as an NFL sideline reporter.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Cabot. We've got another packed show this evening. We'll be talking with Daily Wire reporters on the ground in Chicago, getting analysis from a wonderful expert panel, and of course, hearing from all the big-name speakers on the convention floor.
The theme of Night 3 in Chicago will be a fight for our freedoms. Among those speaking, we'll see Pete Buttigieg, Nancy Pelosi, Bill Clinton, and of course, the keynote address from VP nominee Governor Tim Walz. And who better to help us preview that address than you, Michele, a 30-year Minnesota native. Yeah. Now, the country is getting to know Tim Walz. You already know him very well. You've been living in his state.
Yeah.
What should the country know about it?
Well, I can tell you that I've lived under all kinds of governors in the last 3 decades. A couple of Republicans, Jesse the Body Ventura, and now we've got Tim Walz. What I can also tell you is that net migration out of Minnesota, we've got negative net migration of all financial classes except the bottom 2 levels of the economy. So a lot of people are leaving the state. And why is that? It might be because 50% of our kids can't read or do math at grade level. So
but Tim Walz is the education governor. He's a teacher.
No, he's cozy with the teachers' unions, and that hasn't helped our kids in the classroom. And they constantly talk about fully funding education in Minnesota without defining exactly what that is. In spite of increased spending, the test scores have gone down. And finally, crime is up. We used to enjoy, and I can tell you this from having been there for 3 decades, a really low crime rate. But now these, and I'm talking about robbery, rape, homicide, the top FBI level crimes are up above the national average, and that has really hurt the state.
The statistic that jumped out to me, I was on the ground in Minneapolis last week. The number of police officers who were actually active in Minneapolis, it's now below 450.
Yeah.
Pre-George Floyd, it was around 800. They cannot find officers who want to be on the force there because of, they say, the environment that Tim Walz has fostered in Minneapolis. Now, I want to ask you, the image that we're getting of Tim Walz in the media, it's this, all shucks, flannel dad, Minnesota nice. Does that match up with the Tim Walz that you've known for years?
It's the image he has always tried to project, but when you peel back the layers and you look at the priorities that he has put at the top of his list as a legislator, as a governor, it's been abortion up through the term of the child. It's been having Minnesota be this state that accepts all kids that want gender-affirming care, meaning gender mutilation, even if their parents don't approve. It's tampons in boys' bathrooms in the public schools. They're weird priorities. They like to use the word weird. These are weird priorities. We'd like kids to get educated. We'd like lower crime like we used to have. And we'd like a better tax environment, and that has driven a lot of people out as well. A very high tax environment, especially for businesses.
Now, Governor Walz we've seen a few scandals come out. Not necessarily a media scandal because that requires the media to cover it.
Yeah, they don't.
But we've seen the stolen valor accusations. We've seen some of the him appearing to falsely claim that his family had used IVF procedures to have children. His wife now coming out this week and saying that's not true. What do you make of these emerging scandals?
Well, what makes them scandalous is that he's not telling the truth. He's not being straight with people. He's embellishing or bending the truth over and over and over again. And that tells you he's a wolf in sheep's clothing and
a wolf in flannel.
A wolf in flannel. There we go. And it's just, so the guy that they're presenting isn't the guy that is really there.
Well, we're going to have a whole lot more on Tim Walz because he's going to be taking the floor in just a few hours. We're going to be going all night to the speakers on the floor. But first, here to break it all down with us tonight, in person, we have Grace Curley, host of The Grace Curley Show on the Howie Card Network. Come on in, Grace. Great to have you here. And also Ryan Girdusky, author, commentator, and publisher of the National Populist newsletter. Guys.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's going to be a long, fun night. We're going to make it fun. We're going to choose joy. We're going to get to the floor.
Choosing joy. Woohoo!
We're going to get to the floor in a few minutes. But first, I want y'all's takes on what we've seen the previous 2 nights. We'll start with President Obama and Michele last night. Ryan, what have you made of it?
Yeah, Michele gave her origin story of being a poor, impoverished black woman who never took more than she needs. That was really moving. And then Barack Obama was speaking to, I guess, suburban whites when he sat there and said, don't worry what pronouns we're using. It was very bizarre. And then Hillary Clinton has given the same speech for 4 DNCs in a row, which how her mom was born before women could vote. It's this entire woman narrative that I don't know why no one's noticed. It's the same exact speech. I could give it at this point. And then that brief moment from Kamala Harris for 35 seconds where she was in like the Carmen Sandiego outfit. It was very, very, very strange. Listen, they had a really great roll call. That was exciting. I didn't know Little John was still alive, but he is. I'm very happy to know that. But it's fine. It's a normal convention. It's a little speaking down. They're also trying to recast Kamala. Kamala is a 3-act play. There's Kamala the prosecutor, Kamala the vice president and senator, who was a radical leftist, and now Kamala, who's apparently been a hardliner on immigration her whole career. We just didn't notice.
She has brilliant economic ideas too, yeah.
Yeah, and she's really been doing the hard work. We just didn't realize that.
I'd love to hear you give Hillary Clinton's speech sometime. I really would like
I could probably almost memorize it verbatim.
Well, what's interesting to me, Grace, is that we're hearing a lot about women and empowering women and getting women into the Democrat tent from the same party that is diminishing Title IX and making it less competitive for women in sports and other areas. So this I am woman, hear me roar message is not resonating with me
Yeah, and it's also so crazy that so much of this pro-woman stuff that's happening at the DNC is also side by side of this pro-abortion. And I know it's you're not supposed to say pro-abortion, you're supposed to say pro-choice. They have a van outside. Planned Parenthood has a van outside giving out vasectomies and abortion. So I think it's safe to say now it's a pro-abortion party. And that doesn't really make sense to me either. But I love what you said about Michelle Obama saying that, I didn't take more than I needed. I mean, these are people who have multi-million-dollar deals with Spotify and Netflix and have a giant home on Martha's Vineyard. And now for them to spin this into woe is me, I'm just like you, I understand the struggle, is ridiculous. And I think it could have landed in 2016. I think all of this, these platitudes of happiness and joy, that could have worked. Now people are in a different stage of their life. Now people are angry. They're looking at their grocery bills. They're looking at their, how much it takes to fill up their cars. And I just don't think all of these happy thoughts and these nice speeches are going to cut it for people.
Well, so they've been in charge forever. Right. Democrats have had the White House for 12 years. So we're going to recover from what? It's from you. And also, how mad would you be if you got your free vasectomy and then, pro-gospel will tip the van over while you're doing it? That would be horrible.
And on the idea, too, of recovering from what, Michelle Obama kind of gave a backhanded compliment last night to Kamala. She said, I have not felt hope in such a long time. Right. And she said, we can't wait for this Goldilocks moment where everything is perfect. We have to work with what we've got. Essentially saying, yeah, Kamala's not great. I haven't felt hope under Biden either, but we've got to rally. I thought that was an interesting moment.
And she hated being first lady, so she probably hasn't felt hope since the 90s.
Now, Stevie Wonder is on the convention floor right now. We're not going to go to him unless, he looks like he's having a lot of fun. Maybe we'll get to him later. But right now, I want to get to Cassie Akiva.
Does he know he's there?
He does. Leave it to Ryan to get going with the blind jokes on Stevie Wonder. We're going to get now to Cassie Akiva, who is outside of what looks like a pretty large protest. Cassie, what are we seeing there in Chicago? Has this one been peaceful? Have we seen any violence? What's the mood?
Well, I'm at a not-so-joyful protest, just blocks outside the DNC. This protest is actually quite large. I'd say there's about 6,000 people here, and it did get violent. We have a clip I want to show you. But first, I just want to let you know that we're back at the park right now, and police are standing by because they don't want it to get violent like it did earlier. Here's the clip. So during this confrontation with police, there's a guy holding a flag and a guy trying to get on top of a ledge, and the police did not want that. So what happens is these protesters are very calculated. They have the idea that if one of them gets arrested, if all of them charge the police, they'll be able to free the person who was arrested. So we've seen that several times today and throughout the week. They are very organized. They have their own sort of security who gets involved and gets right in the police's face. It's been quite tense, and we expect it to continue being this way tomorrow as well on the last day of the DNC.
Now, Cassie, what is the goal of these protests? We haven't really seen many of them get into the convention center. I imagine they're a few miles away from the perimeter. So what are they actually thinking they're going to accomplish?
They're actually right next to the perimeter. So they went right in front of the United Center, probably about a block away, and the police were completely, standing by, forcing them to walk in a loop away from the convention center. It got a little tense there. They didn't want to get away from it, but they did. Now, these protesters have two demands. The first demand is for Kamala Harris to not become president. They are not big fans of her, and that's the majority of them. Now, the second demand that they have is for a ceasefire, and I'm not quite sure what kind of ceasefire they're looking for. We've seen several Hamas headbands and Hamas T-shirts. We saw a Taliban flag earlier. We've seen Hezbollah flags. So there are a lot of people here who are supporting terrorism. I mean, they're blatantly wearing it. And in fact, one of the ones that we saw was a flag that had the spokesman of Hamas on it. And we've seen a few of those here. So this is a very radical group. And it's not just, older people. They actually have children in these crowds. I've seen a baby. I've seen kids as young as 3 years old walking around. Their strollers. So it's a very strange event, not something that you'd expect to see.
Yeah.
Organized for sure. I mean, as she describes it, when you talk about them having somewhat of their own security. And the masks, I noticed a lot of them are wearing masks and sunglasses.
They're very concerned about COVID.
They're germaphobes. who also I think don't want to be ID'd. I'm guessing. I mean, how many of them actually are willing to put their faces out there? Can you tell? Are there any, or are they all just masked up?
We're seeing all sorts of masks. There's keffiyehs. There are COVID masks. They definitely don't want to be seen. I have to say, though, the protest doesn't smell so great, so I'm not sure a mask is such a bad idea. But they definitely are trying to conceal their identities for sure.
Awesome. Well, Cassie, please stay safe and maybe throw a mask on to keep the smell out. It definitely looks like not the best smelling rally. But please stay safe. We'll get back to you a little later this week. Thanks for being on the ground there, Cassie.
Thanks so much.
All right, that was Cassie Akiva. Guys, I want to get your takes on the balancing act that Kamala Harris has been playing with regard to these protests and the Israel issue as a whole. What do you make of it?
Well, I mean, Joe Biden said they have a point. So
Did he say there were very fine people on both sides?
He said they have a point. What they're saying when they said, when they attacked him and came out for Gaza. I don't know how she plays this because it's not a question of, let's say, like the Jewish vote, because the Jewish vote isn't very large nationwide. It's like, a few million, and they're mostly living in New York or Florida or non-swing states. There's a couple in Pennsylvania, I guess. I think the bigger question is, how does she not upset Muslim voters who live in more swing states? There's 200,000 in Georgia. There's several hundred thousand in Michigan and Minnesota and Wisconsin. The immigration patterns that we have seen over the last 20 years, we've doubled the Muslim population in the United States since 9/11, and they have been going increasingly to swing states. That will have a larger effect. If Kamala Harris loses and they're able to take credit for her losing over this issue, this will be the last time you see the Democrats on a national level even playing footsie with being supportive of Israel. It will be over after this point.
Yeah, I was thinking of what you were saying about Tim Walz as governor during the George Floyd riots, and I think they're going to handle it in a similar way. Just tell people, have the fire blazing behind you and say, everything's fine here, it's mostly peaceful, everything's fine. So this is the same way she's handled everything. It's just denying reality. And it's really emblematic of the entire Democrat Party. You have these crazy riots outside, and then inside it's like kumbaya. They're all singing together, having fun. It showcases to people how they're not connected to what's really going on.
Well, I wonder how much all of this is going to change after tomorrow night. I mean, people are saying once we get to Friday, everything changes. Everything gets more difficult for this Democrat Party when they start to have, they've got to answer questions at some point. Right now, they're doing what Tim Walz did during those George Floyd riots. They're shutting up. They're not around. They're not showing leadership. They're just running out the clock at this point. What do you think changes fastest first?
Here's the problem with Tim Walz as a politician, because as a congressman, he was one of the more moderate ones. But when he ran for governor, he chases the internet. So if the internet sits there and says, boys need tampons, he's like, absolutely. No matter what the most insane group of people on Twitter say, he will agree with them. He'll never get to the right of them. And that's the way Kamala was as a senator as well. That's a very dangerous place to be because Twitter is not real life. Mm-hmm. And that is why you see insane comments after insane comments from the two of them, is because they chase the left wherever they go. And I don't think that ends after Friday. I mean, they could try to play around, but that's where they've been for years.
I think it's worth pointing out also, you say things are going to get worse after the convention. College campuses are going to start filling back up as the fall is commencing. You are going to expect to see some of these occupation-style protests. And you're saying that the Democrats are going to have the same reaction they did, which is to stand back and let it happen. I think if you're the Trump campaign, there's an incentive also to sit back and let it happen. We all know the adage, never stop your enemy when they're fighting amongst themselves. Right. I could see the Trump campaign maybe not putting too much pressure on university presidents to shut these things down the way we saw in the spring, and essentially saying, leave them to their own devices. And to your comment also about how it's kumbaya inside and chaos outside, that's also what we saw from President Obama last night. Yeah. The message he was giving was hope. It was his 2008 rerun of people were chanting, yes, we can. It felt like they were playing a loop from the 2008 convention. And he's giving this message saying, we need to, revert to our better angels, and we need to give grace to people that we disagree with, while stoking the same hatred that he's saying America's evil for. I want to play a clip here from last night and get y'all's reaction to it, where President Obama talks about people in your life who make you cringe, who might be prejudiced, and how we should react to them and treat them.
If a parent or grandparent occasionally says something that makes us cringe, we don't automatically assume they're bad people. We recognize that the world is moving fast, that they need time and maybe a little encouragement to catch up.
He went on to say we should extend the same grace to others who disagree with us that we would want extended to ourselves.
But you know who that person is? That's Barack Obama now. Barack Obama, who's now in his 60s, is that man who says things that they cringe at. Barack Obama would probably get booed by people at a college campus today. That is
kind of like Jerry Seinfeld does when he tries to stand.
And that's why he doesn't do them anymore.
Yeah.
But because they have moved so far left. Listen, you create your own monster and then you can't control Frankenstein after a while.
Yeah.
That is what they've done. And that's what Barack Obama did as well.
And he's been trying to warn progressives for a really long time through different speeches and different interviews that you can want all of these things and you can have this as your platform, but you just can't say it out loud. You can't be so open about it. And that's, I think, the issue he takes with, for example, the protesters outside or the rioters outside. It's not that he necessarily disagrees with them, but he just wants them to be a little bit more nuanced in their approach. And I don't think he gives that grace to people. I don't think the Democrats in general, look at what Michelle Obama was saying about Trump's comment about black jobs. The Democrats have a way of anything a Republican says, they immediately give the least benefit of the doubt as they possibly can. They twist it to be the nastiest, most racist, xenophobic thing they possibly can. And so for him to say, we have to give people grace, it's like, I would like that, but that hasn't been happening over the last couple of years.
Look what he did to John McCain and Mitt Romney.
Well,
John
exactly.
McCain and Mitt Romney were not, racist. They just weren't. But that is how they were broadcast by the Democratic people in the media. And, Barack Obama certainly didn't stop them when they were sitting there and saying anything bad about them. They were horrible, misogynist, racist. People want to take this country back. Say what you will about them. That wasn't either one of those two men. And he has absolutely never told an actual progressive sit there and say, stop saying this. He speaks about the progressive in the air, like the one that we can't see, but one that possibly could be out there. He's never actually sat there and told someone to stop it.
One interesting moment that last night kind of went unnoticed was first the fact Kamala Harris was not there. You would expect, she held a rally in Milwaukee about 90 miles away. And from everything we've heard, the reason she was not there is because they did not want the optics of Barack Obama and Michelle Obama speaking on stage. The Biden family hates them right now because everyone knows that Obama helped put the dagger in Joe's back. And the Kamala campaign was worried that if she was in the room soaking up this adulation from the Obamas, if she's there tearing up as Barack and Michelle say how great she is, that it would make the Biden camp even more upset. So kind of an interesting dynamic here where you've got the sitting president and you're having to deal with his feelings and his vice president doesn't want to offend him by going to the former president. It's this weird
You know what else
It's
I
all
noticed?
really weird. Very weird.
You know what else I noticed? The only person who's not mentioned so far being the first female president is Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris has never talked about breaking a glass ceiling. She's never done the cringy Hillary Clinton feminist-like trope. She's very much avoiding that, and I would love
Why do you think that is?
Because Americans don't want to vote for a female president. I mean, that's the truth of the matter. Let's be honest. Americans do not want to vote for a female president.
Oh, I disagree with that.
I don't.
I think it depends on who that woman is.
Yeah, if it was a woman that I trust.
Yeah, if Margaret Thatcher was revived.
Can you imagine Condoleezza Rice running for president?
No.
You don't think she could win the election?
No, I don't.
Because she's a woman?
Because she's part of the Bush administration. But I think the Bush administration would probably think that.
I do think that, regardless of the polling on how many Americans would or wouldn't vote for a woman, there is the reality that Democrats perform far better with women than with men. There's about a 10 to 15% disparity. It's always been there,
Except
that
for
gap.
Us. I don't
I'm
get
glad
it.
you guys are outliers.
Yeah.
There's always been that disparity where women have been more likely. The gap has grown. We've seen more of a discrepancy. Why do you think that we've seen, Grace, the gap between genders grow more, where we have more women, predominantly single women? Married women are actually more likely to be Republican than Democrat, but single women going to the left.
You know what's funny is that you asked me a version of this before and I didn't have a great answer, so I asked it to somebody else. I asked it to John Davidson from The Federalist, and I said, can I ask you this question? And
I'm still waiting for an answer, Grace. I'm coming back to you on it.
I'm going to steal his because I wasn't happy with mine. That a lot of women in the Democrat Party, I think, look to the government to be kind of their...
I wonder if Mindy Kaling's among them. She's on stage. I just want to point that out while we're talking of women. She's there. And why, though? Why is it... Do women believe they're not strong enough to do it on their own? This is something that I don't understand.
It's hard. It's like, I also think a lot of it has to do with indoctrination. Like, for example, when I was in school, I graduated in 2014, and I really did have a wonderful life at school. It was not all about politics. It was not, I never got the sense anyone was trying to get me to believe something. And I think from when I graduated to now, that shift of pushing all of this ideology on people, and women, of course, has had an effect. I mean, if you go through K through 12 and you're being told something every single day, and maybe if you don't have a home life where people are bringing up other ideas, you're more likely than not going to fall in line.
And I do think that the abortion issue also plays a massive role. We have a country, like it or not, that is addicted to abortion. And I think that plays a role as well, which I want to get to the Republican side on this. The RNC platform pulling back on abortion. From a strategic standpoint, what do you make of that move?
It's smart. I think it was a smart move to make. I think that, listen, and Nikki Haley was correct when she said this. If there were 60 Republican senators, 300 House members, and a Republican president, we wouldn't get a national abortion ban. It's never going to happen. So let's argue over taxpayer-funded abortion. That moves people in different directions, but it's never going to happen. Also, if you even read Scalia wasn't sitting there and saying we should have that the federal government should be involved in this. Make it a state's issue, make it a local issue, and be done with it.
So why are the Democrats so successful then with this Project 2025 and painting abortion as this massive priority in their platform?
Well, there was a poll out that 2/3 of Democrats believe that abortion was banned when Roe was overturned. See, most people don't get an abortion in their life. It's not like everybody's doing it, but the thing is that people have an idea of an abortion, and they have an idea of who could get it and where they can find it. And it's not even that they live necessarily closer to it. Remember, abortion was declining for years before Roe was overturned. There was few abortion clinics left in a lot of states, and it wasn't met with this. It's the idea more than it is the actual access to abortion.
Guys, we're going to get to the floor of the DNC now, where Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries is taking the stage. Let's hear from him.
And Vice President of the United States of America. Over the last 2 years, House Democrats have been hard at work, and we could not have asked for a better leader to partner with than President Joseph Robinette Biden, who will go down as one of the most consequential presidents of all time. Last month, President Biden selflessly passed the torch to Vice President Kamala Harris, who is ready, willing, and able to fight for the people. Kamala Harris is a courageous leader, a compassionate leader, and a common sense leader who will deliver real results for everyday Americans. Kamala Harris is fighting for our freedom. Kamala Harris is fighting for our families. Kamala Harris is fighting for our future. Together, let's make Kamala Harris the 47th President of the United States of America. In our great country, when you work hard and play by the rules, you deserve to earn a living wage. You deserve to have an affordable place to call home. You deserve to educate your children in a great public school that is free from gun violence.
All right, that is Hakeem Jeffries speaking from the floor. We also have one of our reporters, Spencer Lindquist, who is in the arena right now. Spencer, thanks for coming on. Give us a little bit of a breakdown. What is going on today? And then we'll get to RFK. But first, just tell us about the environment there today. What's going on right now?
Yeah, so today we've seen more protests. There's actually protests that are currently ongoing as we speak right now. And we were there earlier today. They do seem to be growing in number. We're seeing a lot of the same messaging from these protests that we've seen throughout the rest of the week. They're expected to continue tomorrow, and we'll continue to watch and cover those to see exactly how they continue their messaging as they continue to march on the DNC.
Let me ask you about RFK Jr. His running mate has suggested that they're thinking maybe they're going to drop out, and coincidentally, he's got an event in Phoenix on Friday. So does the Trump campaign. How legitimate is this idea, or are these reports that these two campaigns are going to link up?
Now, there seems to be a lot of credence to these rumors right now. We've seen that ABC, Washington Post, various other outlets are reporting on it. And we're seeing the case be laid out against the Democratic Party from the RFK Jr. campaign. Here's his running mate, Nicole Shanahan, who recently explained how the Dems were trying to stifle their campaign, the RFK Jr. campaign. Here's what she had to say in a recent interview.
It's Bobby's decision. I came into this supporting him wholeheartly to win this election. Mm-hmm. And I have to say there's only one party that has obstructed a fair election for us. And unfortunately, it was the Democratic Party. They've done everything they can, including creating PACs to prevent us from being able to have ballot access.
So as you can see, it looks like the contours of this race, might really be changing up here on Friday, where it could be dropping down from a 3-candidate race to a 2-candidate race. We've seen in some of the recent polling that RFK Jr. seemed to be right around the 7, 8, 9-point mark. So him dropping out and endorsing Trump could really make a significant difference in this race as we get closer to November.
And are you hearing any concern from Democrats there at the convention about this development? Is there talk that this could be problematic for the Democrats?
You know, I haven't spoken with people here on the ground about it, but what we have seen is that RFK Jr.'s people, they've been out here at the DNC, certainly making a show of their support for the candidate. And it certainly does indicate that there could be a changing nature of this race. I mean, right now on Thursday, that's when the DNC is going to be wrapping up. That, of course, is when Kamala Harris is going to officially be nominated as the candidate. And she might have to go into the rest of this race viewing it not as a race against two different people, not as a race where these votes might be split up, but against a Trump campaign that is unified, a third-party contender who otherwise could have had a significant effect on this election.
Yeah, all right. Well, Spencer, thank you so much. We hope you stay safe out there and stay energetic. It's going to be another late night for you. Thanks so much for that. Spencer Lindquist, Daily Wire reporter. Right now is the moment where we're going to take a little look at the impact that RFK dropping out could have on this race, which means I get to go do my favorite thing. Guys, I'm sorry I'm leaving you, but I am just obsessed with this
Drop us a line.
board. We are going to go to the Daily Wire election hub. Again, everyone at home, you can go to dailywire.com, click the election tab right there, and you can roll through the map and see which candidate can get to 270. So first, let's just talk about the most likely electoral path to victory for each side. The bottom line is if either candidate wins Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, they get to 270. For Republicans, it would be 279. For Democrats, it would be 270. So if you have a path to victory, you are going to have to win all three of these because the odds of only winning one of these states are very low. In 10 of the last 11 elections, all three of these states have picked the exact same candidate. Looking back to the 1940s, 15 of the last 18 presidential races, Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, have picked the exact same candidate. So oftentimes these states are voting the same way. Now, there are still paths to victory by only winning one of these three states. For example, for Republicans, if they hold on to North Carolina, which is increasingly becoming a battleground state in recent days, but if they hold on to North Carolina, if Republicans win Pennsylvania and Georgia, they get to 270. So that appears to be the quickest route. If you're not able to sweep all three, if you can only win one of them, Pennsylvania and Georgia, holding on to North Carolina does get you to 270. Now, I want to go back to my favorite scenario here, and that is Republicans winning Pennsylvania and Michigan. Pretty plausible. Let's say they also win North Carolina, but Democrats win Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, That leaves each side at 269 electoral votes. The other word for that, Michelle, you were with football in a long time, that's called a tie. And in the real world of election politics, there is overtime, but that overtime goes to the House of Representatives and the Senate. The House, in this scenario, would vote for the president, whichever candidate gets the caucus of 26 states, and the Senate would vote for the vice president, whichever candidate can get to 51 votes. They would be the VP. So a lot of fun to go through potential scenarios. That might be chaos, but as a political nerd, you always want some chaos. So I'm kind of hoping for a little bit of chaos. Now you can scroll down here on the Election Hub and have a look at the polling data as well. So this is where we get to RFK. Now in a head-to-head race right now, depending on which polling sites you're looking at, we pull our data from Decision Desk. They have Kamala Harris with a 3-point lead right now nationally. Now it's interesting, Donald Trump, if you look through the timeline here from November, December, January, he was up by around 7 points for the vast majority of this election before Kamala Harris was the nominee. When Joe Biden dropped out right here at the end of June, Trump was still up 7% nationally. Now again, Kamala Harris was not the nominee. When she becomes the nominee, you can see this blue line explode upwards. You see her gaining momentum. Donald Trump's numbers actually more or less staying the same while Kamala's were rising. Now, the Trump campaign says, look at that blue line. That shows you the power of the media. They say Kamala Harris has not held a single press conference. She's not actually sat down for an interview. All that people are falling in love with is the idea of Kamala Harris. But that is a real jump that we have seen. Whatever you think of polling, whatever you think of them underestimating Donald Trump, polling is helpful for trends. And there is a trend where Kamala Harris appears to have momentum, whether you believe that she's ahead or not. Now, this chart here shows what happens when RFK Jr. is on the ballot. In recent months, this is since July, in recent months, you can see Kamala Harris's numbers begin to climb here. That red line there is Donald Trump, and it stays almost exactly the same when RFK is on the ballot. That seems to imply that Kamala Harris has had Democrats sort of come back home, that she has coalesced those disaffected Democrats who had been supporting RFK before this, while Donald Trump has not peeled those people off. And so if you look at polling averages now, when RFK is on the ballot nationally, Kamala is up by around 4 to 5 points. So if RFK drops out this week and does endorse Donald Trump, what happens to his 3% of supporters? And of those 3 to 4% of supporters, how many of them would follow RFK's lead and go to Trump? Would they go to another third-party candidate like Cornel West or Jill Stein? We just don't know. But one thing we do know from the data is that RFK Jr. lately has been a drag on Trump's numbers. We'll see if that changes if he does in fact drop out. It looks like he's going to. Once the running mate starts saying things like, I support the decision of my running mate, they're going to have to make that decision for themselves. That's what Democrats were saying about Joe Biden. How did that turn out? So it does look like he's going to be dropping out. So, guys, thank you for letting me nerd out.
No, and by the way, she also said the only party that didn't, that was in our way was the Democrat Party. They are no fans of the Democrats, RFK and his campaign right now. The other thing that this would do on Friday is steal this bump away potentially from all this attention on the Democrats and Kamala Harris and let them steal the news cycle as Bill Clinton's going to try to do right now.
So let's get to Bill Clinton right now. Let's see what he has to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Whoa. Let me ask you something. After the last 2 days, aren't you proud to be a Democrat? And I am very grateful to the Republicans and independents that have joined us, have been up here on the stage. And I hope they feel better about it now. Because I've seen all these things that even I have to be reminded of from time to time when I get my spirits down. I love seeing the Obamas here. I love seeing President Biden. And I thought Hillary gave a great speech, too. And I love seeing all these young leaders. A bunch of them are coming up after me. They look better, they sound better, and they'll be exciting. I do want to say one word about President Biden. Remember, he had an improbable turn that made him president. And we were in the middle of a pandemic and an economic crash. He healed our sick and put the rest of us back to work. And he strengthened our alliances for peace and security. He stood up for Ukraine. He's trying desperately to get a ceasefire in the Middle East. And then he did something that's really hard for a politician to do. He voluntarily gave up political power. And George Washington knew that, and he did it. And he set the standard for us serving 2 terms before it was mandatory. It helped his legacy, and it will enhance Joe Biden's legacy. And it's a stark contrast to what goes on in the other party. So I want to thank him for his courage, compassion, his class, his service, his sacrifice. Joe Biden, thank you. And he kept the faith, and he's infected a lot of the rest of us. Now let's cut to the chase. I am too old to gild the lily. 2 days ago, I turned 78, the oldest man in my family of 4 generations. And the only personal vanity I want to assert is I'm still younger than Donald Trump. Last night, in what I thought was a very moving series of episodes, we nominated Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. And just think about that. 2 leaders with all-American but still improbable life stories. It could only happen here. Their careers, after all, started in community courtrooms and classrooms. 2 leaders who spent a lifetime getting the good job done. Now, one of the things that I've noticed over my increasingly long life is that a presidential election is unique in several ways. First of all, it's the greatest job interview for the greatest job in the world. Secondly, the Constitution says we, the people, get to do the hiring. And the third thing is that every 4 years, we get to change the requirements for the job. So here's what I'm thinking, because I try to apply this in every election. Will this president take us backward or forward? Will this president give our kids a brighter future? Depends. Will this president bring us together or tear us apart? Will the president increase the peace, security, and stability and freedom that we enjoy and extend it to others as we can? We, the people, we have to make a decision about these kind of questions. And every 4 years, it's a little different because the people come at the candidates, and they say, as they're saying now, here are our problems, solve them. Here are our opportunities, seize them. Here are our fears, ease them. Here are our dreams, help them come true. A president can answer that call by saying, I'll do my part, but you have to help me. We have to work together. Or you can dodge what needs to be done by dividing, distracting, and diverting us. So in 2024, we got a pretty clear choice, it seems to me. Kamala Harris for the people, and the other guy who's proved even more than the first go-around that he's about me, myself, and I. I know which one I like better for our country. Kamala Harris will work to solve our problems, seize our opportunities, ease our fears, and make sure every single American, however they vote, has a chance to chase their dreams. You know, when she was young, she worked at McDonald's. And she greeted every person with that 1,000-watt smile and said, how can I help you? Now she's at the pinnacle of power and she's still asking, how can I help you? I'll be so happy when she actually enters the White House as president, because she will break my record as the president who spent the most time at McDonald's. Now, but we got an election to win. And remember, we've got a guy that's pretty good at what he does. Donald Trump has been a paragon of consistency. He's still dividing, he's still blaming, he's still belittling other people. He creates chaos, and then he sort of curates it as if it were precious art. Let me say, not a single day goes by, even though I've been gone for well over 23 years from the White House, not a day goes by that I don't thank the Lord for the chance I had to serve and what it meant. And one of the reasons, thank you. Wait. One of the reasons I love the job so much is that in the toughest times, even on the darkest days, if you tried hard enough, there was always something good you could do for somebody else. Now, some days that's not easy to do. You've got to deal with all these emergencies, or there's something going on here, there, or yonder. But Kamala Harris is the only candidate in this race who has the vision, the experience, the temperament, the will, and yes, the sheer joy to get something done. I mean, look, what does her opponent do with his voice? He mostly talks about himself, right? So the next time you hear him, don't count the lies. Count the eyes. Count the eyes. His vendettas, his vengeance, his complaints, his conspiracies. He's like one of those tenors opening up before he walks out on stage, like I did, trying to get his lungs open by singing me, 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 me. When Kamala Harris is president, every day will begin with you, 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 you. So, we got to ask ourselves the questions if we're going to hire a president. Do you want to build a strong economy from the bottom up and the middle out? Or do you want to spend the next 4 years talking about crowd size? You're going to have a hard time believing this, but so help me, I triple-checked it. Since the end of the Cold War in 1989, America has created about 51 million new jobs. I swear I checked this 3 times. Even I couldn't believe it. What's the score? Democrats 50, Republicans 1. I'm glad that we've got a championship-winning coach on our team. But even the most limited of us in what we know about football or any other sport knows that if you're got 50 and the other side's got 1, you're ahead. What about affordable housing? It's a terrible problem in America now. We need more. And affordable health care. That's why the Democrats put a limit on monthly payments for insulin and a $2,000 a year out-of-pocket limit, and are trying to cover more drugs by bargaining for prices. We need more financing for small businesses. We need still to strengthen our alliances. I almost croaked in the first debate of this election season when President Trump said nobody respected America anymore like they did when he was president. Wait. And with a straight face. Look, you got to give him. He's a good actor. With a straight face, he cited as evidence of the respect that existed for us when he was there the presidents of North Korea and Russia. I'd rather have the people who respect us now. And one of the things is when you send a signal to the other countries, you want them to know whether they agree with you or not, at least that you're on the level. Here's where you are and what you believe. What are they supposed to make to these endless tributes to the late, great Hannibal Lecter? I mean, President Obama once gave me the great honor of saying I was the explainer-in-chief. Folks, I thought and thought about it, and I don't know what to say. Like Hakeem Jeffries, I too want an America that's more joyful, more inclusive, more future-focused. Just think what a burden it's been on us to get up day after day after day after day, buried in meaningless hot rhetoric, when there's so many opportunities out there, so many problems that need to be solved. I want that. And that's the America Kamala Harris will lead. She's already made her first presidential decision, and she knocked it out of the park when she asked Governor Tim Walz to be her nominee for vice president. As they used to say when I was a young man growing up in Arkansas, you do not have to be all broke out with brilliance. You just look at Tim Walz, listen to him, follow his record as a teacher, as a coach, in the National Guard, as a congressman, where he was the only Democrat, save one, elected in that district in more than 100 years. And he stayed a long time. And then he became a great governor. And by all accounts, he was a crack shot who had the courage among his rural constituents to say, we do not need these assault weapons available to people who can kill our kids in school. So, armed with her first decision, Kamala Harris confronts an interesting dilemma. We're going to walk out of here feeling pretty good, I think. We've got energy, we are happy, we feel like a load's off our shoulders. And we know we're just being asked to fight the same fight that the forces of progress have had to fight for 250 years. In the face of stiff and often violent opposition, we have to find a way to go forward together, where we the people make our union more perfect. So, that's a good thing. How could we possibly lose Kamala Harris has fought for kids her whole life that were left out and left behind. She's taken on gangs trafficking across the border. She's fought to protect the rights of homeowners. She's been our leader in the fight for reproductive freedoms, and we know a majority of the American people are with us on that. And she's gained an invaluable amount of experience as vice president, advancing our values and interests around the world. She's already said she's going to work really hard to make sure that no American working full-time lives in poverty or has to worry about their children living in poverty. She says that we got to make home ownership an achievable dream for everyone, not just a privilege. She said that and this meant a lot to me, that she would protect everybody's right to vote, whether or not they voted for her. They were a citizen, and they deserved the right to vote. The other day, her opponent implied that as his people voted one more time, they'd be able to rig it from now on and they wouldn't have to vote again. You think they're kidding, but I know a lot of these folks.
Okay, well, we're going to dip out of this Bill Clinton monologue for a little bit because it seems to me, I don't know about you, this thing was dragging on and on and on. And for a guy who boasts that he is, 3 months younger than Donald Trump, he presents as about 10 years older than Donald Trump. So this is, I don't find this to be a shining moment.
Yeah, STDs do age you.
Okay, there we go.
No, I just think that, I think that the Democratic Party he represents, the president that he was as a Democrat, they would have booed him out of the room. I mean, it's very weird this man who couldn't really get a big presence in 2016 because of Me Too and was canceled by the Democrats is now their buffer to Nancy Pelosi. By the way, he's like a decade younger than her, too. So maybe he is like the young man of the night besides Tim Walz, who also who looks 20 years older than he actually is. I don't understand where is the old 90s Bill Clinton magic?
Well, he's aged quite a bit.
Yeah. And the party has passed him by. Bill Clinton campaigned on abortion as safe, legal, and rare. He campaigned on the Defense of Marriage Act. The party has passed him by.
Reduced immigration.
Yes.
And so it is a very different party. What interests me from this speech is the moment where he compared Joe Biden to George Washington, saying George Washington stepped aside and set the precedent, and now Joe Biden's doing the same. Not mentioning that George Washington stepped aside after 2 terms, not 1, and stepped aside voluntarily. Joe Biden stepped aside with knives protruding from his back.
Yeah.
Grace, what do you make of that comparison, Joe Biden and George Washington?
Well, it's absurd. I mean, no one actually believes that Nancy Pelosi and her gang of Democrats weren't pushing him out the door. It's insane to compare him to George Washington. It's actually kind of funny at this point. But the other thing that I found a little bit offensive, if I were Joe, like you were saying how there's this theory that Joe's sitting there very sad. He's watching all of this. He's offended.
The louder they cheer, the sadder he gets because it means they're happier.
Yeah.
But the thing that if I were Joe, I would really take offense at is how Bill Clinton keeps saying, like, we all feel this weight has been lifted. We all feel so good. And it's like he's trying to say, aren't you so happy we got rid of him? It's like, that to me
I hope you're happy now and proud that you're a Democrat because we got rid of the old guy and we're going to do this. But that has been a theme all week, and they're acting as though these first 3.5 years never happened, and that Kamala Harris had nothing to do with any of it.
And we're gonna turn the ship around now. From who?
From who?
From who? Who are we talking about? They're in charge right now. This is crazy town. And I'm sorry, but this is like, you know, those people who just don't know that their time is kind of ended, like the celebrities that don't know, the football player who maybe is in for 1 too many seasons.
Yeah,
I've met Bill Clinton right now. He wasn't entertaining. He wasn't good. Apparently his teleprompter broke. but his endless streams of it was like those, we just said while they were talking, it's like those signs you see at TJ Maxx, like live, laugh, love. It's like when people have a nervous breakdown, they put those signs all over their kitchens.
Yeah.
That was Bill
That's
Clinton's
what all the platitudes
hallmark platitudes.
I would also say that this convention has been peppered with politicians and people like this, or sort of the elite, the stars and that sort of. To me, the most powerful thing I've seen at either of these conventions were the everyday Americans, they called them EDAs, in the RNC. The people who talked about their real life experiences, whether it be losing a child to fentanyl or losing a son who was a police officer to violence in New York. None of that energy has been here, at least that I've seen.
Yeah, and I think a part of the reason that you're right on that is because Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, all of these, Barack Obama, they all get up and they want to talk. They've been used to going around their whole lives talking about themselves. And so now they have to kind of pivot a little bit and try to talk about her, but you can't really talk about her because she has no policies. So they end up getting up there. And I remember when Hillary was up, she said, the story of my life. And I thought, the story of your life? You shouldn't be saying those words at a convention that's not for you. Yeah. And he kind of took these digs at Trump and said, Trump's all about me, me, me. And it's like hearing that from a narcissist like Bill Clinton. It's really rich.
Yeah.
You're going to lecture.
Because Bill Clinton's so humble.
I was like, is he going to start telling us about sexual harassment next? Like, really, this is really
a respect
rich.
for women. No, but also the fact is that they don't have regular people because they have actors who play regular people.
That's a good
point. They have Julia Louis-Dreyfus. So, why have like a person dealing with a problem when you have Elaine? So I think that they're trying to fill the void by saying, look how star-studded we are. We have Minda Kaling and Julia Louis-Dreyfus and 5 people who played the president. So that must be good enough as being the president.
So Bill Clinton wrapping up now. Nancy Pelosi will be taking the stage any minute now. There could be another speaker sprinkled in there. But also the applause that Bill Clinton got, it still was a rousing, raucous applause we heard from the crowd. And this is something that I think is going overlooked. When Hillary Clinton took the stage, you could time the standing ovation she got. It was longer than we saw for Kamala Harris. When Joe Biden took the stage, the standing ovation was longer than we saw for Kamala Harris. And I can't help but wonder if there is a little bit of resentment among the delegates in this room who, when it was clear that Joe Biden was going to be pushed aside, many of them were thinking, this is my moment. It's going to go to the floor. The delegates are going to get to decide who this is going to be. We don't have time for some rushed primary. It's going to go through us, the delegates. That was taken from them. Kamala Harris was installed. And I can't help but wonder if there's a little bit of resentment from the delegates saying, you guys took our power away from us. We were supposed to be the ones doing this process.
Biden picked all the delegates. The Biden team picked all these delegates. They're just not random Democratic delegates. Yeah. They personally selected all these delegates. So, there must be a few Biden loyalists who feel some ways. And I think that, and Ben Domenech mentioned this, there is definitely a nervous energy in this crowd. It's not all excitement that they think she's absolutely, an easy chance to win.
Right.
It's just that they went from we have a coin toss election to we were going to lose New Jersey.
Right.
And that's where the excitement really comes from is we're not going to get crushed everywhere.
No. We're going to go down swinging.
Yeah.
One moment I want to get to as we prepare for Tim Walz. Actually, Speaker Pelosi coming out right now. Let's get you back to Chicago.
Hello, California. Hello, Maryland. Hello, Democrats. On January 20th, 2021, with the inauguration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, we established one of the most successful presidencies of modern times. And we quickly proved that Democrats deliver. Millions of jobs, stronger infrastructure and rural broadband, a Biden child tax credit, rescuing human pensions, honoring our veterans, bold climate action, lowering the cost of prescription drugs, all thanks to President Biden's patriotic vision of a fairer America, doing so with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Joe. And I know that Vice President Harris is ready to take us to new heights. I've known Kamala Harris for decades. Personally, I know her a person of deep faith, which is reflected in her community care and service. Officially, she is a leader of strength and wisdom and eloquence on policy, most recently demonstrated fighting for women's right to choose. Politically, she is astute and strategic in winning difficult elections, quickly securing the nomination with dignity and grace, and choosing Tim Walz as our vice president. I had the honor of serving with Tim for 12 years in the Congress. He united Democrats, Republicans, and independents to turn a red district blue. He showed courage when he came to Congress in voting for the Affordable Care Act, meeting the needs of his constituents despite Republicans' lies and misrepresentation. When he went home, won the election, he returned to Congress. He fought for our Americans' heroes as the Democratic leader of the Veterans Affairs Committee. Thank you, Tim. January 6th was a perilous moment for our democracy. Never before had a president of the United States so brazenly assaulted the bedrock of our democracy, so gleefully embraced political violence, so willfully betrayed his oath of office. Let us not forget who assaulted democracy on January 6th. He did. But let us not forget who saved democracy that day. We did. And thank God we had a Democratic House of Representatives then. We returned to the Capitol that very same night. We insisted on certifying the election results on the floors of the House and the Senate. And we demonstrated to America and to the world that American democracy prevailed. The parable of January 6th reminds us that our democracy is only as strong as the courage and commitment of those entrusted with its care. And we must choose leaders who believe in free and fair elections, who respect the peaceful transfer of power. The choice couldn't be clearer. Those leaders are Vice President Harris and Governor Walz. When the sun rose on January 7th, as our national anthem declares, we gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Now, in this election, we are called upon to do the same, to stand together, to reject autocracy, to choose democracy, and we will do so by electing a Democratic House with Hakeem Jeffries as Speaker of the House, electing a Democratic Senate, electing Tim Walz as Vice President of the United States, and electing Kamala Harris as the President of the United States. Onward to victory!
All right, that was former Speaker Nancy Pelosi A lot we could say about that. But first, I want to get to the man that she was talking about so much, Governor Tim Walz. I actually traveled to Minneapolis last week to speak to residents about Governor Walz. On Monday, you guys got to see a segment I did with a business owner who had to leave the state. In this episode, I speak to Liz Collin, a reporter at Alpha News, who has really been blowing the whistle on Walz and his devastating leadership in the state of Minnesota. Have a watch.
It's obviously early on a Monday, but it really does look almost entirely different than what it once did, for sure. Before you'd come on a Friday or Saturday, there would just be people for blocks and blocks. You just kind of took your safety for granted. You have a police force in Minneapolis that's down about 40% from where it was at the beginning of May of 2020.
So back to 2020, the George Floyd incident happens. How quickly was it that the riots began and that you felt the unrest growing?
It was really by the second night that you knew you were, not safe. This is when the fires started. I worked at the local CBS station for nearly 15 years in all, but was married to the president of the police union, who was a longtime Minneapolis police lieutenant. That summer, we had 4 different protests at our house. One in which they brought piñatas of my husband and myself. We were beating piñata effigy in our driveway. There's about 150 BLM people there that day. But I was canceled. I was kicked off the air, essentially, demoted from my anchor role that I held, and had to look for another job. I always really believed in, kind of balancing the news and whatnot, but I really saw things change with COVID and especially with this George Floyd story in the sense that we weren't telling the public the full picture. We were helping to sort of, craft this narrative, and we were just fine pushing this on the public when we knew it wasn't true. I knew there was so much more going on with this, and I couldn't understand for the life of me why we weren't telling our viewers what the real story was. Yeah. These officers went to work that day. They followed their policy, and they're lifelong felons. They were thrown in prison for that. They saw evidence being manipulated in that case. The officers in the 3rd Precinct were basically fed to the mob. They were used as political pawns. They can't chase people in the city anymore. It's a use of force. If they handcuff someone, they have to call a supervisor. A lot of them, they rethink their every move, if you will. It's almost as if police officers have become like firefighters, sort of, waiting to put out the fire. Whereas before there was proactive policing, there would be more interaction that way, and there was also a respect and a bit of fear of the cops and whatnot. But that dynamic has certainly changed.
You have been covering Minnesota politics for over a decade. What should the rest of the country know about Governor Tim Walz for people who are unfamiliar?
Well, that's what I find interesting. He's being sold as this moderate, aw shucks guy who, will give us some dad jokes. But there's never been a more radical governor ever in Minnesota history. Legislation to turn Minnesota into a trans refuge state. Children can come here and change their sex without parental permission.
I want to shift gears to the stolen valor accusations against Governor Walz. I think people are just now starting to become more aware of this story. You've been covering it for a while now.
So I did this story originally when he was running for governor. It was very easy, I'll be honest, to substantiate these claims. These were 3 command sergeant majors in total that came forward to say that he left his unit high and dry before their deployment to Iraq, but more than anything, that he'd been using this rank, this command sergeant major rank, when he did not attain that rank, and he used it for decades. This isn't like a slip of the tongue here and there. I think this is part of his track record. Again, I've interviewed dozens of people at this point in my 20 years in Minnesota with connections to Governor Walz. He manipulates things. If you even look back at a lot of people I've interviewed, they use words like masterful liar. And, his support or lack of support, I should say, for law enforcement is well documented, and a widow came out and said, I don't want you at my husband's funeral. These 2 police officers and fire medic die in this horrible shooting in Burnsville, happened in February. And he wanted to come make a statement like hours after it happened. And the city of Burnsville said, no, we don't want you there. We've never seen that sort of level of pushback against a governor, at least in my time covering politicians here.
I love that you went to Minneapolis. I love that you spoke with, I know Liz Collin very well. We've done a lot of things together, and I admire the courage she has taken to, to get canceled and then pursue all these truths in spite of that. She has never backed down from any of this. That did take me through these memories of the George Floyd riots, of the burning, of the governor not being there, of the governor not exerting any kind of leadership. And she is right. We're getting this, aw shucks, ain't he a fun dad who wears flannel and listens to cool music. That is a caricature of this governor, and I'm glad that you got to see it firsthand.
So we're going to go to Liz now. Liz Collin, thank you so much for joining us. We had a very interesting, I don't want to say fun, it was a very interesting morning together, so thanks for joining us again. I will let you know, Michele, as a Minneapolis and Minnesota local, was nodding along with everything you were saying and saying, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
What do you make, Liz, of the way that Tim Walz has been talked about on stage in Chicago this week?
It's good to see you guys, and I'm so glad you have Michele's voice there tonight as well. She's one of my favorites. I've always been a fan of her. Sometimes I feel like we're the only conservatives willing to speak out in Minnesota or something. We're on this island together. But it's I really base my decisions in fact as a journalist, and it's simply there are so many facts that are just not there when it comes to what the public is being sold about our governor. It said in the story there, the most radical governor in Minnesota history, the most radical abortion laws in the country on the books in Minnesota, abortion up until birth. So many things that are happening in our schools, which I know Michele has done quite a bit of reporting on as well, that just never happened before Walz became our governor six years ago. I mean, he did not carry his congressional district in this last election, as rural Minnesota has really turned on him. But you see these camouflage hats that I can't help but laugh at every time I see, or these flannel references that we're hearing constantly, or tater tot hot dish recipes, or all of these things. It's almost, and even, I mean, Michele can speak to this too, how he's even acting is so strange to me. I've covered him before. He's a completely different person. This waving, I don't even know what's going on.
It almost seems as though he is on this constant audition for affection from the American people. The way he dances around and smiles and hugs people and nods along and throws his arms up. It is weird. It's a different iteration of him. But, we've talked about the stolen valor, which you detailed. And when Democrats come back, Liz, and they say, well, he served, you should honor his service. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a dishonesty. And this also came up this week when he said, IVF is very important to me because without it, I wouldn't have my daughters. First of all, full transparency, I went through multiple cycles of IVF. It's a really, really invasive, really expensive procedure. It ended up not working for my husband and me as much as we went through it. But the difference is, yes, they may have had a different approach to fertility. Why does he feel the need to embellish and twist the truth? That's the problem I have, not the problem that I don't care that he went through it. What I care about is his embellishment of all this. What is this about, do you think?
I've been trying to figure that out also, Michele. And as I've talked about this in so many of these stories I've done over the years, it's not my words. It's the people that I've interviewed talking about his lies. Tim Walz lies became a thing years ago, not just when he was running to be the vice president. And there's a reason for that. And I will say, my book, it's called They're Lying. He's a big part of the they here in Minnesota. And I've requested, I honestly, double digits at this point, how many times I could, I wanted to sit down with interviews for him on many different subjects, and he's always declined. And, I think there's a reason for that. He's not very available also for reporters, or if he is, it's, Minnesota's largest newspaper, the Star Tribune, which I think has been getting, really put under the microscope and the spotlight shined on them brightly. You have a former commissioner of Walz now in charge of the newspaper.
Right.
And you see the favorable coverage that they give him on a day in, day out basis.
Liz, the Harris campaign has been touting Walz for his executive experience, saying he's been in charge of a state, but they haven't always talked about what the ramifications of him being charged have looked like. We talked off camera about the sort of exodus out of Minnesota. Mm-hmm. Tell our viewers a little bit about the numbers on the number of people leaving the state and some of the reasons for why you think they're leaving.
Yeah, these are some interviews I've done, Cabot, along the way. I mean, we're talking about tens of thousands of people at this point, and I think it's even more. And I think the number is something like $2 billion in income that has left Minnesota on his watch. These are the people you want to stay in your state, but in those interviews, as I told you, he's always named as one of the top three. People think, oh, you moved from Minnesota because it snows or it's cold. No. A lot of it has to do with his politics, as he's really embraced this radical progressive ideology.
And the taxes, of course, and the lack of safety. I mean, you talked, and you know full well, you detailed the numbers of police that we've lost. And I've spoken to the Minnesota Police and Peace Officers Association, and the demoralization on just the faces of these officers, it's heartbreaking. And then we end up feeling it on the streets in and around Minneapolis. And really, it's gone out to the suburbs. No one's really free from it.
Yeah, we talked about in that story, the Minneapolis Police Department down 40%, but they're struggling to recruit all across the state. And 5 police officers, have died in a matter of 13 months. 5, I should say, first responders. One is a fire medic, as I talked about. That's never happened in history before, and that's because not only are the citizens of Minnesota less safe, but so is the front line, our brave men and women who have signed up to serve. But sadly, they've been used in this political gain, and so much of that is from our governor. Sometimes when he says nothing at all, that has spoke volumes, in my opinion, on so many of these stories.
And one of the times where he said and did nothing at all was during the George Floyd riots, when he waited nearly a week to deploy the National Guard, despite local officials in those cities begging him essentially to send in backup. Liz, final question. Talk to us about some of the police policies that are going on in Minnesota right now. You told me when I was there about one new policy where police are not really able to pursue suspects, another that had to do with who they could and couldn't handcuff. Just give viewers at home an idea of what it would be like to live in a city under Governor Walz's leadership.
Well, we have mandatory overtime shifts that I know Minneapolis, they're required to work now. They're in single squad cars, meaning they're by themselves responding to a lot of these scenes. That's what we saw in Officer Jamal Mitchell's death. He was by himself. That didn't happen, years ago. There would always be two to a squad. And I think that these policies have been devastating in so many ways. But again, our governor has, for the most part, put criminals on pedestals and not sided with the cops, even when the facts were there. I mean, he's the first person to use the term murder, even when it comes to George Floyd, and helping to fan the flames, make this all about race. He loves identity politics. I mean, he really embraces that and pushes that very dangerous and divisive narrative on the public as well.
All right, we will leave it there. Liz Collin, thank you so much for the work you're doing up in Minnesota. We will hear more from you soon. Thank you so much again.
Bye, Liz.
Thank you, guys.
Now, I want to get to a clip. We're about to hear from Pete Buttigieg. I want to get to a clip of J.D. Vance, who actually did himself serve a combat tour in Iraq, talking about Governor Walz and why he was speaking in Chicago this week. I believe we have that clip. If we could play it for folks, have a listen to this.
My little theory about why they decided to have the convention in Chicago is, Tim Walz has been going around saying that he served in war, and maybe they did it in Chicago so that he could actually accurately say that he visited a combat zone. Because Chicago, Chicago has violent crime statistics that actually mirror, again, third world, highly violent countries.
So does Tim Walz get credit for going to a combat zone now? He's in Chicago. That's the other thing. We see these protests breaking out, which maybe have not been as violent as police were expecting. And maybe one reason is because of the overwhelming police force that had to be sent there. It is amazing also how when BLM is burning down cities and when gangs are taking over entire portions of Chicago and other cities, there's a bit of a hands-off approach. But when it's the DNC that's being threatened by these protesters, they bring out everyone possible to shut them down. And
DNC is more secure than the border is.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's 100% true.
If only they thought Walz worked.
So let's talk about the border then. Again, we're going to be getting to Pete Buttigieg shortly, but the border has been mentioned in the single digits each night. Now, if you look at polling, immigration and the border are around in the second to third or fourth most important issue for Americans. They're not talking about it. When they do talk about it, though, the message is things are actually better now. President Biden said that illegal crossings had gone down compared to Donald Trump. And that is how they're talking about it. Either let's ignore it or things actually aren't that bad. Ryan, does that work?
Well, Biden did. There's one thing that she keeps talking about is this bipartisan deal that failed in the Senate, and she's saying that Trump killed it. But the bipartisan deal, one, wouldn't have done what they think it would have done, or what they claim it would have done. And then Biden did executive action right afterwards anyway. His executive actions have worked to a point, but also what Biden has been doing like the One App visa, the One App, where he's been bringing 30,000 migrants per month from 5 countries, Nicaragua, Cuba, Venezuela, Haiti, I think there's one other one, to deter it. They had to close that program down last week because there was so much fraud going on in it that they brought 100,000 people in who had absolutely no claims to a visa. They were like giving out wrong addresses. It was one person had picked up, I think, 10,000 people that he claimed that he had sponsored. They don't believe in the idea of nationhood. They don't believe in the idea of citizenship. And what the DNC endorsed yesterday as far as their immigration platform would basically end any sort of backstop we have to our immigration system. It would it would promote the idea of having the president fly in people who've been deported to come back in to get citizenship. And they've also ramped up the time limit, the wait time. They've decreased it so more people got citizenship faster. There have been 3.3 million people who've gotten citizenship since Biden became president, fastest of anyone since Obama, because they know these people vote 70% Democrat, legal immigrants, not illegal, but legal immigrants. And they know that, and they play these numbers to sit there and say, okay, how do we make sure that this goes as fast as possible so we can tilt Texas further, North Carolina, yada, yada.
And they deny it and deny it and deny it. And the gaslighting is astonishing to me that they have said the border is secure, the border is closed, don't come, all of these things. And yet we can see with our own eyes and look at the numbers and look at how much Chicagoans are suffering from all of these people coming in and demanding
the serial killer that was just arrested in New York, by the way, from Chile, who had killed 25 people in Chile, crossed in May, and was living in New York City in like a migrant house.
But he was just looking for a fresh start. He was here to contribute to our economy.
New York is that place that just everyone gets a fresh start.
To this point about the gaslighting, and it kind of goes to what you were saying, Cabot, where they want to tell us how great everything is, right? And inherently, that does not make any sense because at the same time, they want to say how secure everything is, but they don't want to talk about the border at the convention, and they also don't want Kamala Harris to be called the border czar. And my question there is, if everything's going so swimmingly, if you're doing such a great job with everything, then wouldn't you be proud to be the border czar? Wouldn't you be like, I was in charge of that, and look how great it is? No. But obviously they know that as much as they want to try to fool people, people can see it with their own eyes. You just have to look at the drone footage, and it's a complete mess.
Well,
and that's what it's going to be.
Also, the economic conditions inside blue cities and blue states. The Massachusetts governor had to sit there and reduce the amount that the state was giving to municipalities for their firefighters because they had a migrant crisis. Colorado, Denver is on the brink of bankruptcy. The mayor of New York said it's the worst crisis we've ever had as a city, and he doesn't see an end in sight to it. Every single one of these cities is dealing with huge budget crises because of this border crisis. And they're all Democrats, by the way.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point, the cities you're mentioning there. A lot of times people assume naively that the only cities impacted by illegal immigration are southern border states. You mentioned New York, Colorado. When I was in Minneapolis, I was sort of thinking, well, has it really reached Minnesota? Like, I know it's everywhere, but has it really reached Minnesota? We held a focus group where I asked a number of Minnesotans, can you notice a difference? And one gentleman said that he had a family friend who went to the emergency room with a very normal infected cut that he needed treated, that he waited for hours and hours and hours because the entire waiting room was full of people who he said were illegal immigrants or migrants that were coming there from a housing facility that had been down the street. That gentleman who was waiting ended up getting sepsis, died a week later. And he said, hours could have made a difference in them treating that infection. He wasn't able to get it. And so it's a myth to think that this is only impacting border states. It is impacting everywhere.
If you look, and if you look at even places in Pennsylvania, towns like Hazleton, right, which went from being 90% white in the year 2000 to 80% Latino 20 years later. If you are a 40-year-old who bought a home there and you're 60 years old now and no one speaks your language, no one listens to the music you listen to, you have nothing to identify the community. That creates social isolation and a decrease in social capital like nothing else.
Oh, come on. You just lack empathy and compassion.
But you know what?
Sounds like the.
But you know what? When the migrants were sent to Martha's Vineyard, they enriched them and then they shipped them out as fast as they possibly could.
And now we actually have, in Massachusetts, they're big on reticketing. So you know how like Ron DeSantis does that, like he did with Martha's Vineyard. He sent people from Florida to Martha's Vineyard. That was bad. That was called human trafficking.
Yes.
On the left. They were saying this is awful. And now Eric Adams, Governor Maura Healey, all these people, they've set up these reticketing agencies where basically they said they're a sanctuary city or a sanctuary state. They were very happy with it. But it's like sending out invitations to a wedding where you send out a bunch and you go, those people are never going to come. I can send invitations to Ireland. My relatives are never going to show up.
Yeah.
Sometimes they come knocking on your door and they say, actually, I am going to show up. And then they go, never mind.
It reminds me, Ryan, of what you were saying about the change that we've seen in just 2 decades in this one county. That is sort of a microcosm of what's happening in so many communities around the country. But J.D. Vance had an interesting message at the RNC where he said, people like to talk about America as if it is just this idea, and that America is this aspirational idea. He said, no, America is still a people and a culture. And it's not just this idea. It is a people that needs to be defended and a culture that must be defended. And that is the impact of illegal immigration. Josh Shapiro, governor of Pennsylvania, just took the stage. We're going to get to him. I wonder if he's going to address the fact that he was maybe not chosen as the vice president because of the fact that he's Jewish.
I doubt
the
it.
fact that he
they could have had the Jewish Obama instead they picked the communist Fred Mertz.
Let's hear what Governor Shapiro
choice the Democrats
has to say.
You know, Kamala and Tim's names may be on the ballot, but it's your rights. It's our rights. It's our future and freedoms that are on the line. And you have the power to shape the future of this country. Just like our ancestors who fought for freedom on the battlefield and sat in at lunch counters so our kids could stand up. Now it's on us. It's on us, my friends, to organize in our communities and on our For You pages around 3 basic American principles. We value our freedom, we cherish our democracy, and we love this country. And listen, we love this country. And listen, despite our challenges, hear me on this, I want you to know I have never been more hopeful because I see in all of you the enduring promise of America. E pluribus unum, out of many one. It's not merely a motto from the past, it's our direction for the future. You see, you all give me hope, and you all have the power. So let's use that power. Let's do the hard work necessary to win this election and write the next chapter in our American story. So are you ready to protect our rights? Are you ready to secure our freedoms? And are you ready to defend our democracy? And are you ready to elect Kamala Harris and Tim Walz? America, let's get to work.
Well, there's yet another audition for 2028. But having said that, joining us now from Chicago is Spencer Lindquist. He's been talking to some of the attendees at the convention and some radical attendees regarding immigration policy. What do you got?
Well, what we've seen right now from a lot of the messaging on the convention floor from our speakers, from these elected officials, is a lot of conversation about the economy and about abortion, which we know are some of the biggest issues for voters going into November. But one of the other big issues is immigration, and that's something that really has not been discussed with any degree of length on the convention floor. So I went out and I spoke with some people, just some DNC attendees, and many of them told me that they are concerned about the state of the border right now under the Biden-Harris administration. And this is an issue that the Harris campaign is really going to have to figure out their messaging on as we near November, because it's emerging as a critical issue, not just among Republicans, not just among independents, but even among many Democrats who are concerned with how this current administration has handled the issue.
Spencer, you were in the room when Bill Clinton came on stage. What was the reaction like? Was it genuine excitement? We keep hearing about the enthusiasm there. What were you feeling? Was that sort of the loudest that you've heard the room?
Yeah, I think there was quite a bit of genuine excitement for him. We've seen various different levels of excitement, I'd say, throughout this week. When Obama came on last night, the crowd was thrilled. They were enthralled. And I was down on the floor trying to do some interviews. There was no interviews to be had. Everybody was zoned in on the speaker. Tonight hasn't been quite as excited. There hasn't been quite as much excitement among the crowd. But I presume that a lot of that energy is going to be regained tomorrow when they finish up this nomination process and when Kamala Harris goes on stage.
Just a little tip, Spencer, if you want people to talk to you, maybe remove the Daily Wire logo from your microphone. I don't know if that is why, because you're such a nice guy. I'm sure they wouldn't turn you down otherwise. Spencer, thanks so much for coming on. I will give you a gold medal for your performance when you return. And speaking of gold, during this polarizing political season, security is obviously top of mind for many Americans. And gold and silver are an excellent way to diversify your savings and add financial security. Through our friends at Birch Gold Group, you can own physical gold and silver in a tax-sheltered retirement account. Plus, backed by very popular demand, now through the end of this month, you can get your very own 24-karat gold-plated truth bomb on qualifying purchases. And we actually have some 24-karat gold bombs we're giving to all of our guests here. I'm sorry, guys, I'm kidding. We don't really have those.
I want that.
We don't really have those, but you can have one if you text WIRE, W-I-R-E, to 989898 and receive a free, no-obligation info kit to learn the role that precious metals play in your overall savings strategy. Again, text WIRE, W-I-R-E, to 989898 today. I will say, guys, we just had the Ryman Backstage event, Daily Wire Backstage Live at the historic Ryman Auditorium. When we had that same advertisement, a wonderful gospel choir came out on stage and sang that ad, and I think that was a little more entertaining than what I just did.
You're plenty good.
Speaking of entertaining, the poet Amanda Gorman is now on stage. I'm sorry, I'm not fully up to date on my poetry. Let's go hear what she has to say. I want to hear if she's reciting a poem or speaking. Let's go to Chicago.
Oh.
Sorry for all the fans of poetry at home.
Yeah.
You missed.
That was actually a reading of Project 2025.
Which, by the way,
that was what that was.
Go to project2025.com. All of our viewers at home, you might see a little surprise if you go to project2025.com. All I'm going to say, it won't be what you expect when you get to the website. Hint, hint, Matt Walsh is undercover at the DNC passing out placards for people to go to project2025.com.
I would go there right now.
That's
when we're done.
I'm going to say.
We're done.
That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
So, guys, what do we think about the Democrat strategy trying to attack Donald Trump for Project 2025, which, again, it's worth noting is not an official campaign.
Well, it must.
plan.
I mean, it has to have some effect in the polling. They wouldn't be mentioning this much. I was very interested in Josh Shapiro because there are several contenders who want to run for president who are in high office right now. Pritzker, Newsom, Whitmer, Shapiro, like very, very high, have their own consultants, their own pollsters working on a possible presidential run. Shapiro was the only one who even went into the VP conversation, I think in part because Democrats instantly thought she had no shot in running. when Shapiro was seriously being considered, a lot of negative information was coming out in major media sources to anything Shapiro had done that was poorly. That was coming from other Democrats. And I have to sit there and think, if Kamala wins this election, that means Democrats have a presidential candidate until 2036, right? Yeah, candidate rather, 2036. Shapiro will be out of office. Pritzker will be out of office. Newsom will be out of office. Whitmer will be out of office. All these people who are spending millions of dollars on consultants, on stylists. I mean, look at the way Whitmer looks now. I mean, she looks like the Real Housewife of Detroit. These people are all gunning for this. All their dreams will die. And I wonder in my head how many of them think she is going to lose. And this is the audition for 28. This is not her inauguration as she's actually going to win this race for president.
So can I ask a question?
Sure.
Did they choose Tim Walz because he was the only one who would say yes? Because when we watched that package with Liz Collin, she said that it was very easy to substantiate all of these claims about his stolen ballot. It was very easy to figure this out, put the pieces together, and you really just have to have the will or the curiosity.
Right.
And so I can't imagine that they have the White House, they have the VP who's going to hope to become the president, and they don't vet this and know that he's going to come with all this baggage.
Right. They waited a bit. The thing was that, according to the New York Times, I trust their reporting on this, is that the meeting with Shapiro and Kamala went horrendous because Shapiro was like, I'm going to be your partner. And she said, no, you're not. I want a VP who is basically my rubber stamp to do whatever I want, is my fallback guy. And Walz accepted that position, and Shapiro pushed back on it because Shapiro really has his eye on a national office as president. And also the fact that he copies Obama's cadence and how he speaks is like so incredible.
Well, and she copies Trump's policies, so it wouldn't work. So,
no, she came up with no taxes on tip.
Yeah.
But in that way, they have a lot in common. Harris and Walz, they both never would have gotten this position or gotten this opportunity the traditional route. And like what you're saying, Josh Shapiro thinks, I'm good enough. He has that confidence to say, I'm good enough to win a primary. I'm good enough to actually be somebody. I think Walz, based off what you've been telling us and based off my own research, this is his only shot at this.
This is his only shot.
Yeah,
I mean, the fact that they were even considering Tim Walz, let alone selected him, was stunning to me and to a lot of people in Minnesota who know that this guy is a fraud.
Yeah.
And so...
he's got a weird lying problem.
That's your word.
No, but it is genuinely strange. It's not something... like every politician exaggerates their record. They exaggerate how much they did. We know that of politicians. He lies about literally everything to include himself in a conversation. It's like an SNL character.
Speaking of one of those lies, I want to play a clip here where he talks about how his family used IVF procedures to have children. His wife later came out and admitted that that was not the case. Let's watch that clip. And then, Michele, I want to get your reaction to this.
Yeah, first of all, it was up to him. I wouldn't have a family because of IVF and the things that we need to do reproductive. My kids were born through that that way.
Today's IVF day. Thank God for IVF. My wife and I have two beautiful children.
It was not accurate.
It was not accurate.
It was not accurate.
Well, the distinction is IVF is not, or IUI is not under attack anywhere the way IVF is, but it is part of the suite of options. Most people begin with one and go to the other.
We're glad that he has two kids. It's also important for politicians to be accurate.
Well said, Jake Tapper. I'm amazed that I'm saying that. Yeah, said no one ever until this moment. But these two types of fertility treatments are very, very different. I say this from experience. We had a lot of trouble. So for him, and by the way, the other part of the lie here is that he's saying if J.D. Vance had his way, I wouldn't have kids. J.D. Vance is not against IVF. No one in this, I can't think of anyone that is running for president right now or vice president is against IVF. I think this is what happens. When abortion becomes less of a wedge issue, like they can't use it to scare you as much anymore because now it's to the states, they go abortion and IVF. Yeah, let's do that. It's almost like, and I've heard this from gay activists, once gays got the right to marry and adopt children and have all of these rights that they wanted, and they didn't need the donations as much. Let's go on trans, and they extend the problem or stretch it so that there is still a need for the fundraising, for the arguments,
for the nonprofits.
And for the nonprofits.
Those nonprofits have hundreds of millions of dollars.
So much money.
You can't close.
I want to jump in here, let our audience know you get a car, you get a car, and you get a car because Oprah Winfrey is taking the stage. Let's hear what she has to say.
So fired up. We can't wait to leave here and do something. And what we're going to do is elect Kamala Harris as the next president of the United States. I am so honored to have been asked to speak on tonight's theme about what matters most to me, to you, and all of us Americans: freedom. There are people who want you to see our country as a nation of us against them, people who want to scare you, who want to rule you, people who'd have you believe that books are dangerous and assault rifles are safe, that there's a right way to worship and a wrong way to love, people who seek first to divide and then to conquer. But here's the thing. When we stand together, it is impossible to conquer us. In the words of an extraordinary American, the late Congressman John Lewis, he said, no matter what ship our ancestors arrived on, we are all in the same boat now. Congressman Lewis knew very well how far this country has come because he was one of the brilliant Americans who helped to get us where we are. But he also knew that the work is not done. The work will never be done because freedom isn't free. America is an ongoing project. It requires commitment. It requires being open to the hard work and the heart work of democracy. And every now and then, it requires standing up to life's bullies. I know this. I've lived in Mississippi, in Tennessee, in Wisconsin, Maryland, Indiana, Florida, Hawaii, Colorado, California, and sweet home Chicago, Illinois. I have actually traveled this country from the redwood forest, love those redwoods, to the Gulf Stream waters. I've seen racism and sexism and income inequality and division. I've not only seen it, at times I've been on the receiving end of it. But more often than not, what I've witnessed and experienced are human beings, both conservative and liberal, who may not agree with each other, but who'd still help you in a heartbeat if you were in trouble. These are the people who make me proud to say that I am an American. They are the best of America. And despite what some would have you think, we are not so different from our neighbors. When a house is on fire, we don't ask about the homeowner's race or religion. We don't wonder who their partner is or how they voted. No. We just try to do the best we can to save them. And if the place happens to belong to a childless cat lady,
all right, that is Oprah Winfrey speaking at the DNC convention. There was one funny moment there where she started talking about how most people in America will help you and most people in America aren't really that bad, which is a bit ironic given the Democrat message that America is racist and rotten to its core. And then there was a USA chant that started by about 5 people and then died out.
They died immediately.
Very quickly. Very quickly. Maybe this is not the place to try and get
Her husband Gail probably started it.
Oh, gosh. Maybe this is not the place to get a USA chant going. But we are going to go now to our good friend Mark Hemingway, the senior writer at Real Clear Investigations. Mark, thanks for coming on. First, what do you make from these first 2.5, almost 3 nights now of the DNC? We might be having a few problems getting to Mark there. Mark, can you hear us? All right, we'll try and get Mark connected, and we will come back to all of you. So, guys, what do you make of the fact that
she was very shouty?
The DNC, what do we think of Oprah?
Was super I mean, for an entertainer who you would expect to have a better ability to deliver a message, start someplace, move someplace, because the words she's saying are actually very inspiring, but the delivery is horrendous.
You know what I think happens? You get on that stage, and there are so many people out there, and I know I've been in loud places where you have to talk, and you just kind of start talking as loud as you think you have to. I think that's part of it. But what I don't appreciate is, again, the lies, the misrepresentations. They would have you ban books. No one's banned a book in America. The books aren't banned. We've maybe moved them on the shelves, but we haven't banned them.
Democrats love pulling books like To Kill a Mockingbird off curriculum.
Oh, that's a good
That happens
point.
all the time.
Oh, yes, it does.
They do absolutely. In Pennsylvania, in Josh Shapiro State, they did pull a lot of those kinds of books off of the curriculum.
So it looks like Mark Hemingway is back. We're going to try this again. Mark, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. I want to get your take first, just on what you make of the first 2.5 nights of programming from Chicago. Looks like we lost Mark again.
Oh, no.
The universe does not want us to hear from Mark Hemingway. I think that he maybe just had a few too many truth bombs that he was going to drop on us. So we
needed those.
We will leave him there. But we're going to be hearing in just a few minutes from Pete Buttigieg, and then we will get
He's
to
finally
Tim
back from paternity
Walz.
leave in time for his DNC.
Well, I do wonder, Pete Buttigieg has been such a darling of the Democrat Party. And I'm not sure why.
It's insane. He was a mayor of a town of like 400 people. They had race riots while he was mayor. The black population booed him on the regular. He runs for president as this moderate that is beloved by absolutely nobody. He wins the Iowa caucus by a vote. They flipped a coin or some nonsense. The last Democratic Iowa caucus because it's too white. He becomes transportation secretary. We have constant issues with airplanes, constant issues with ships. We've had shortages all throughout this administration, everything from baby food to whatever they're making in China.
What are we missing? What is it that people
it's
love
an invention.
Michele,
it's this CIA op that he's doing right now.
No, it's because he did such a fantastic job as a consultant at McKinsey, which is just a distinguished job in America.
Okay.
No, it is identity politics. I mean,
he's checking a box.
They need a somewhat well-spoken, kind of higher, than average IQ gay man to get out there.
And all they have is Pete Buttigieg?
He's very good, though, I will say, when he's been in a bind, like you said, with all of these disasters, whether it be train derailments or
he's nowhere to be found.
But he can do interviews and kind of throw out a lot of buzzwords. He's really good at buzzwords. I don't know if that's a Harvard thing where you learn how to do that. He can throw out buzzwords, but I do agree with you that
he does do a lot of hostile interviews. I give him that credit. But
transportation secretary is one of those jobs where I shouldn't really know who you are if everything's running properly.
You're an offensive lineman. Yeah,
exactly. It should be like a silent hero. Oh, you did a really good job. I didn't even know your name.
He said after confirmation, he thought it was just ribbon cutting ceremonies where you hold the giant scissors at new highways. That's what he thought it was. He was completely unprepared, and it's been a complete disaster. All these new EV stations that were supposed to be built across the country, I think he got, a dozen built with billions of dollars?
Well, they didn't have enough funding. Yeah, that is the issue.
I mean, it's remarkable how bad he is at every single thing, and they keep throwing him out there because he's a quote-unquote nice moderate. Yeah. He looks like a mole rat, too. He's unappealing to even look at. I mean, this is just the truth of it.
And so this is what I'm confused by, these various people within the Democrat Party that we see very, very differently. It's as though there are two very distinct lenses in America, and we're looking through some of them, and others are crying over Oprah right now and what she has to say. It's the viewpoint. Like, here's a guy, like you said, who came out of almost obscurity, decided to run for president, said we had racist highways in America, and that was his job as transportation. And suddenly you had people saying he should be the guy that can step in for Joe Biden. At one time, they were saying.
They were, yeah.
I think that tells you how confident Democrats are that the media is going to go along with whatever they say. Because otherwise, you'd be a little bit more nervous about this person needs to have credentials, this person needs to have something to fall back on. We're seeing right now with Kamala Harris, that isn't the case. They can really get away with a lot. But I also just think that, to your point about the everyday Americans, you had said earlier in the show that you'd want to see more regular people. The scheduling of these people, I think, really showcases how incongruous the Democrats are with their own messaging. So you have someone like Tim Walz, who says that socialism, one person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. You have AOC, who's, for the people, getting up, railing against billionaires. And then you have Oprah, and then you have Obama, and then you have
Pritzker, who's a billionaire.
Right. You have all these people who have made so much money, and it's like, you have to sit there. You were just saying the prism we see things through.
Yeah.
So we see it through a certain prism. But how do you not sit there as a person and go, wait, are we supposed to, isn't this billionaire bad?
What you're also seeing, though, is the two Democratic parties, the 70, 80-year-olds who are on stage for the last time to sit there and say, this is the country I know. And then you got all the radicals waiting in the wings. You've got the AOCs. You have the Pritzkers. Pritzker's a nutbag. You have all these people who are as far left as they go, who would never want to be in the same party as Bill Clinton in the 1990s. Right. They would never believe in that America. They're the backup plan.
Well,
this is the future.
The good news, if you guys are wanting to hear from everyday Americans, I talked to a number of those everyday Americans when I was in Minnesota. Oprah did not make the list for our everyday American list, but we had a little focus group in Minnesota. I talked to everyday Minnesotans. Let's hear from them.
So let's get to immigration. What has the impact of illegal immigration and the border crisis been in Minnesota? Because I think there's this perception in the national media that the only people really impacted by the border crisis are people in border states. Has there been a tangible difference that you can feel in the last few years from illegal immigration here in the state?
Education. I mean, you have a lot of these young children from countries all over the world that can't speak English, so they come into the public schools, and now the attention from local kids, tax-paying families, are now redirected towards illegals, which, again, I want them to seek an education, but you got to come here legally to do it.
There's a lot of drugs going on, so that affects it too, especially from the border. So we get a lot of drugs. I know of a lot of different people who are addicted to drugs.
Cabot, I have a little story for you. So my friend brings his 90-year-old father into St. Paul Hospital. 14 and a half hours in the waiting room. He develops sepsis and dies a week later. The waiting room was so loaded with illegal immigrants, he was put on the back burner, and he's no longer with us.
Yeah, some really difficult stories to hear from people. And again, I think it's important to remind everyone the border crisis impacts real people in communities around the country. And that was one thing I heard over and over. Another thing that came up was the tenure of Governor Walz during the COVID lockdowns.
Oh, boy.
Michele, you lived through those lockdowns, which lasted almost longer than anywhere else in the entire country. Yeah. I want to get your opinions, but first, let's hear the opinions of some of those Minnesotans.
What do you think the country should know about Tim Walz? Bob, we'll start with you.
Well, he did a great deal of grandstanding on him being a teacher and really wanting to fully fund education here in Minnesota. For those viewers who aren't aware, it's the largest state line item in our budget at just over $24 billion, and yet 50% of kids can't read.
Well, he gives an impression that he's this moderate, folksy leader. He is extreme in almost every respect. So he fooled a lot of Minnesotans in the last two elections. We can't let him fool the rest of the country.
He despises small business, does nothing to help small business but tax and regulate.
So the biggest thing that I think people need to know about him is, so whatever your stance is on the abortion issue, in Minnesota, it's like the most radical, barbaric laws in the country. Like no restrictions, no parental consent. He assigns his name to something that objectively evil. What other evils is he going to be cool signing off on?
Governor Walz is a failure relative to providing leadership. As vice president, as president, you are the commander-in-chief. As president, commander-in-chief. As governor, when Minneapolis was burning down, he failed to call out the Minnesota National Guard because he didn't want to offend Black Lives Matter. And as a result of that, he failed the basic test of a president or a governor, which is protecting the public safety.
And that last gentleman, that was a seminal moment in Minnesota for Tim Walz in a bad way, because we were all sitting, even one of the news anchors who was on one of the local stations said, "Where's the governor?" Because this was going on for so long and we were not hearing from the governor of Minnesota. And understand that while Minnesota is a large state, there's the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul with the highest amount of population, right? The really condensed population. And then there's the rest of the state, which is often called outstate Minnesota. But so much of the action is right there in the Twin Cities, and certainly during those fires it was. And he was nowhere to be found. Where he was very active was during the COVID lockdowns. And his lockdowns were extreme. People lost their businesses. People left the state. I remember my friends, their kids couldn't play hockey. So they had to drive to Wisconsin in order to have their hockey practices because he wouldn't let them have them in Minnesota. There was a snitch line. If you see a neighbor doing something they shouldn't be doing, call this line. We'll come and handle it for you.
And there were actually people who went to jail for violating that snitch line. I think people hear and they think, oh, what's the worst that happens? They get a little ticket, maybe a $100 fine.
Oh.
There were people who had over 2-month prison sentences for violating the stay-at-home order. Also in Minnesota, there are videos of officials going through the streets, yelling at people to get back in their homes. When they don't, they open up paintball guns on them and begin shooting at them. That was one thing I heard over and over from people, was just how they used the word evil to describe his policies because of the impact it had on their businesses. Now, another comment from Tim Walz as we prepare to see him take the stage in Chicago that has not really gotten that much play, but I heard from person after person, especially people who were coming up for that focus group in more rural areas. There's a clip where Tim Walz is talking about the red counties in Minnesota and the fact that there's, I believe, over 80 counties in the state. 70 or so of them went red in the election. The blue, centers are very isolated.
Right.
He referred to those other red counties as nothing but rocks and cows. And I can't help but wonder if that clip will make its way eventually into the mainstream media and how that could play with voters.
Between 2018 and 2022, his election and re-election, Walz lost about 85,000 votes from the first election to the second one. He also retreated in most suburban areas and rural areas. So this idea that Tim Walz has an appeal to Midwesterners is not true. Without the Twin Cities, which is what every Democrat gets, he wouldn't have won. Also, he also defended the wife beater, who was the Attorney General of Minnesota, who brutally beat his wife. And 50,000 people from Minnesota moved to Wisconsin between 2018 and 2022. That is during his tenure as governor. I wonder if they're going to remember why they left Minnesota to go to Wisconsin. That's enough to flip any election in the state.
Yeah, and two things that you said, Michele, that really stuck out to me is, one, that he was nowhere to be found. And I think that resonates with people right now because we've just had 4 years of that.
Right.
Think of the moments when Trump was almost assassinated where people were saying, where's the president? Has the president made a statement? Where is he? People don't like that feeling. Like, you might not register it at the moment, but there's an uneasy feeling you get when someone is MIA. And the second thing I would say is, I'm not from Minnesota, but I think that what stands out to me about his handling of COVID is we all have, no matter what state you're from, a different memory of government overreach. And he is that personified. So even if you're from Massachusetts, you remember that time. You remember something that happened to you, some experience you lost, some person you lost, some nursing home you weren't allowed to go into. And when you see him and you hear those stories, it takes you right back there. And I think that's a big, big mistake that they didn't realize how much that's going to impact people looking at this ticket.
Go ahead.
No, what are you hearing from people in the state? Again, we're talking a lot about Tim Walz tonight. Kamala Harris will have her night tomorrow night. Obviously, this is all about her, but Tim Walz will be speaking tonight. What were you hearing from people in the state who knew him when he was picked? Was there surprise? Like,
definitely,
it's kind of that moment of people looking around. Me, our guy, really?
There are two things at play here. And by the way, you hear people saying, "Oh, she knocked it out of the park with this first decision to pick Tim Walz." She hit it foul. It wasn't out of the park because this is not a good selection, and they're trying to gaslight you and sell it to you as a great selection. People in Minnesota were split because there was a lot of shock. Why would she pick Tim Walz? On the other hand, Minnesotans are kind of provincial and very proud of their own. So I think this notion that, look at this, we got a guy on the ballot now. There is some feeling about that as well. But people are not going to forget. I mean, I've had so many people text me and call me and email, and I've seen the posts on social media about how badly he handled COVID, how badly he handled the George Floyd riots. And COVID is important. And, it really, some people will say, well, we got to forgive those people because we were dealing with something novel. We didn't know what to do. But other states handled it differently and had success. Other countries handled it differently and had success. Walz just went full on extreme. Don't leave your house. Don't let your kids play with other people's kids. Don't, if you got someone in the hospital, put them in an old folks home, whatever. It was extreme.
Well, you know what? But what they're talking about a lot in the last couple of days is the surge in crime at the end of the Trump presidency, which is true because local governments like Tim Walz and the mayor of Minneapolis allow Black Lives Matter to shoot anyone that they wanted. Yeah. Homicide rate for black men between 18 and 35 between 2020 and 2022 was higher than it was in the 90s. That's basically the entire spike was among black young men being murdered en masse because of Black Lives Matter and their excuse for it. And so they're sitting there and blaming Donald Trump for it, for the surge in crime, when in fact it was Tim Walz, it was Gavin Newsom, it was Pritzker, it was the Democratic governors at the time who allowed, and Democratic mayors who allowed Black Lives Matter to probably cause over 10,000 excess deaths in a few, very, very few years.
So we're talking about Tim Walz. Again, he's going to be taking the stage shortly after Pete Buttigieg. How much of an impact, though, do we see him having on this race? Like, do we think that there are enough voters who are saying, yeah, I don't really care about the VP pick. It's all about the person at the top.
Right, that's part of it. But the election, listen, the election runs.
And I'm not downplaying it. I'm genuinely asking what you guys think.
The election runs through the Midwest. And if Donald Trump wins white voters by a 15% majority, he wins. If he wins by a 13% majority, he probably loses. It is that narrow. It is white men, specifically in the Midwest. How many turn out? Because white men without a college degree have the worst turnout of anyone in the country, aside from recent immigrants. And how many? And how much do they sit there and show for Trump? Part of the reason J.D. Vance is selected is because he has an appeal to those voters. Part of the reason that Walz is because he has an appeal to those voters. Shapiro, apparently they had a big enough problem that they couldn't pick him. But I don't know if Walz's folksy dad thing reaches those people. I don't know if he makes them, honestly, has any impact with those people. Like the people who, are constantly have enough problem with suburban, higher income white voters who may not have a college degree, who live in the suburbs of Milwaukee, suburbs of
Wow, Michigan, we are really slicing and dicing the voter population.
That's how it works. That's how it works. Yes.
But I think of a piece that was actually written by Mark Hemingway, who we were going to talk to earlier, where he said that the point of Tim Walz and why it's important is because it confirms people's worst fears about Kamala Harris, which is she truly is a radical, because now we're supposed to forget everything she's ever done. We're supposed to. You said it's a 3-part story, a 3-part act. We're supposed to forget all of it and just focus on the right now. Put your blinders on. And she could have made a choice that made people go, maybe she is a little moderate, or maybe this ticket is going to be evened out a little bit. And she didn't. She went with the most far left, authoritarian, socialism is like neighborliness pick she could have chosen. And that tells people a lot about the top of the ticket. I don't think people are voting based off him, but it tells them something about her.
It's a great point. Ryan over here has been looking at me saying, please get to Chicago. I want to hear from Mayor Pete. So let's go hear from Mayor Pete in Chicago.
I'm Pete Buttigieg, and you might recognize me from Fox News. I believe in going anywhere, in service of a good cause, and friends, we gather in a very good cause, electing Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, the next President and Vice President of the United States. The choice could not be clearer. Donald Trump rants about law and order, as if he wasn't a convicted criminal running against a prosecutor. As if we were going to forget that crime was higher on his watch. Talks about the forgotten man, hoping we'll forget that the only economic promise that he actually kept was to cut taxes for the rich. And don't even get me started on his new running mate. At least Mike Pence was polite. J.D. Vance is one of those guys who thinks if you don't live the life that he has in mind for you, then you don't count. Someone who said that if you don't have kids, you have, quote, no physical commitment to the future of this country. You know, Senator, when I deployed to Afghanistan, I didn't have kids then. Many of the men and women who went outside the wire with me didn't have kids either. But let me tell you, our commitment to the future of this country was pretty damn physical. Choosing a guy like J.D. Vance to be America's next vice president sends a message. And the message is that they are doubling down on negativity and grievance. Committing to a concept of campaigning best summed up in one word: darkness. Darkness is what they are selling. The thing is, I just don't believe that America today is in the market for darkness. I believe America is ready for a better kind of politics. Yes, politics at its worst can be ugly, crushing, demeaning, but it doesn't have to be. At its best, politics can be empowering, uplifting. It can even be a kind of soul craft. My faith teaches me that the world isn't made up of good people and bad people, but rather that each of us is capable of good and bad things. And I believe leaders matter because of what they bring out in each of us, the good or the bad. Right now, the other side is appealing to what is smallest within you. They're telling you that greatness comes from going back to the past. They're telling you that anyone different from you is a threat. They're telling you that your neighbor or nephew or daughter who disagrees with you politically isn't just wrong, but is now the enemy. I believe in a better politics, one that finds us at our most decent and open and brave. The kind of politics that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are offering. And as you have felt these many days, that kind of politics also just feels better to be part of. There is joy in it, as well as power. And if all of that sounds naive, let me insist that I have come to this view not by way of idealism, but by way of experience. Not just the experience of my unlikely career. Someone like me serving in Indiana, serving in Washington, serving in uniform. I'm thinking of something much more basic. I'm thinking of dinner time at our house in Michigan. When the dog is barking and the air fryer is beeping and the mac and cheese is boiling over, and it feels like all the political negotiating experience in the world is not enough for me to get our 3-year-old son and our 3-year-old daughter to just wash their hands and sit at the table. It's the part of our day when politics seems the most distant, and yet the makeup of our kitchen table, the existence of my family, is just one example of something that was literally impossible as recently as 25 years ago when an anxious teenager growing up in Indiana.
All right, that is Mayor Pete Buttigieg talking at the DNC convention. Grace, you don't look amused. What do you think?
I know it's kind of like the theme of tonight, but someone has to remind these people they've been in charge for 4 years. He keeps talking about how, aren't you guys sick of all of this negativity in politics? We're going to end it. You're literally in the current administration. I mean, you're right next to Kamala Harris as far as, ruining everything. But the other thing I just have to point out is he used the word soulcraft, which
That
I
was
never...
so weird.
I never heard that before.
Well, when politics is your religion, it makes sense that this is a soulcraft.
Soulcraft.
I just, in all his CIA training, did he have to sit there and learn how to try to come off as a normal person? It's so inauthentic. I don't know what he was talking about when it came to his children and as you said, the idea that they're not in charge now and they need something new. He's the sitting secretary of transportation as we talk when our fights were. Well, we said before we're having problems with planes, with trains, and automobiles, and I don't understand this illusion they're trying to throw over voters' eyes to sit there and say, this is a party, we're the change party.
Right.
Change from what? You've been in charge for 12 of the last 16 years.
And you're supposedly in charge right now, which is kind of scary.
Yeah. Yes.
Biden's on a beach and she's here.
Yeah, I think it's true. Who is in charge?
I really do think that is the crux of the tightrope they're having to walk between Kamala saying Bidenomics is working. Inflation is not as bad as you think it is. The economy is the strongest that it's ever been, and we have the best economy in the world. On the other hand, coming out and saying, on day one, I'm going to fix all of these problems.
Yeah.
I'm going to do all this on day one. Well, which one is it?
Well, also,
you have to pick a lane.
By the way, today, while Tim Walz is preparing to speak, they downgraded, the BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics, downgraded that there was 880,000 jobs that were never created, that they claimed there were.
The revisions every month.
I think it's highest revision in history.
Every
15 years.
Every single month, the Bureau of Labor comes out and gives job numbers. And every single month, the media touts them. Every single month, the Biden administration says more proof, we're working. And every single month, they are revised down.
Down.
By
Always
tens
down.
of thousands. The revisions are always down.
This is almost a
and
million.
that does not get the headlines. Yeah, the number
This got a lot of headlines.
It was up until March of 2024. It was 880,000 jobs they were off by. I want to get back to Tim Walz because they're playing a video right now on the floor of veterans speaking out about their service with him, trying to combat some of that stolen valor. Although I would point out, I don't think they were going to be able to find many veterans from his actual unit, or at least people that had to replace him when he retired before his combat tour. But when I was in Minnesota, I went to one of the homeless encampments that had sprung up in a fairly nice neighborhood in the town, or at least what used to be a nice neighborhood. There's a gentleman there who purchased an empty lot. He wanted to build a new home, do some good for the neighborhood, and overnight a homeless encampment sprung up there. It's been there for weeks now. The police were not doing anything about it. He called us over to that location as he was begging them, and the police were essentially saying there's not really much we can do. Watch this video and then understand, just 4 or 5 days after we were there filming, there was a homicide that happened in this homeless encampment in this once nice neighborhood in Minnesota.
Arnie, can you just explain to me where we are right now? What's going on?
We're in South Minneapolis. This is my vacant piece of land. Yeah, I just got a call on Wednesday that people were coming onto the land and setting up tents. So I was just calling the police and saying, hey, just a lot of people are coming here. Over the weekend, there was just a lot of stuff happening here. They did put up that camera, I think, on Friday. There was somebody breaking into a building down the street, like just right over there. There was somebody breaking into the house next door. And then I think somebody OD'd last night. Today they kind of responded and they said, okay, come meet me here. We'll escort you onto the property. You can put these signs up, because I just didn't want anything to happen to me, because I didn't know what was going to happen if I came.
People were not happy you were here.
Yeah.
I was hearing them saying comments towards you.
Yeah. So I've lived in Minneapolis for 25 years. I'm a licensed real estate broker and a licensed builder. Basically, after, the pandemic and the George Floyd riots, protests, whatever you want to call them, that's when everything really changed, with Minneapolis. The whole defund the police, abolish the police. I was blocks away from where George Floyd was killed, and we experienced everything that was going on for those 3-4 days when the city was burning. And it was just, I don't know, there was a sense of like they were just letting it happen for some reason. And it's like, this is literally people's livelihoods. This is small businesses. They're burning down huge apartment buildings. They're burning down the police station. I mean, this is just ridiculous. But like, why didn't they just stop it? They're not being affected by this because if this was the governor's mansion, you think they would let this happen? No, they're not gonna allow it if it's over there, on one of their properties, but they're allowing it to happen here. So am I angry? Yes, absolutely. And I'm sad that it does happen and it should stop. I think they should take responsibility, and I think that they should change course. And I think a lot of these policies aren't helpful, and I think it's hard for people to change course. It's hard to say, hey, I'm wrong about this, and that's what I would like to see happen. I would like to just see this area be like how it was back, before all this stuff happened. And, I would like the city to just clean this up, and everybody, I'm speaking for not just me, I'm speaking for other people who on this block that are scared to speak out, because I know dozens of people who feel the same way about this that I do. And I don't know, it's just people are tired of it. And so that's what I want to see happen. I want them to change it.
So we have some people here, we don't exactly know who they are. They were just standing. I got the sense they were trying to intimidate us.
Yes, absolutely.
What do you make of that?
They were trying to intimidate us, and that's what they do. That's the part of they're wearing masks. They say they want freedom and they want free expression, but they really don't. They want people to think like them. They don't want anybody to challenge it. And it's just like, no, this is my property. This is private property. This is a single family residential neighborhood. Like, people don't want them here. You don't just get to intimidate people like that. That's not the right thing to do. I talked to a lot of people, and they were all too scared to come on camera or even speak to the reporters. And I was just like, I'm not scared. I'm going to be silenced because it's not right, and I'm defending myself, and I'm speaking up for everybody else who is too scared to speak up. And there is a lot of that. There is a lot of that kind of intimidation factor, because people don't want to be like retribution against them,
And is there a vitriol towards you because you are a landowner? I know there's it sounds silly. You're trying to make the neighborhood nicer and better for the community, but do you feel pushback and vitriol towards you because you're supposedly an evil landowner?
This is my first time here. I'm sure these people are like mad at me right now. I haven't experienced that from people in the neighborhood. I've lived here my whole life, and I've worked here my whole life, and I've done good work for people. So nobody's mad at me, I would say. I think people want a house here instead of a vacant piece of land. But the people here obviously didn't want me here. What can you expect, though?
It's difficult to watch. Again, I was there, and we pull up to this vacant lot that was no longer vacant. 25 to 30 people. There were people slumped over almost like zombies. There were people heating up tinfoil with drugs. The night before we showed up, as Arnie mentioned, there had been an overdose there. Neighbors were calling and texting him saying, hey, the window in my kitchen was just broken into. Someone stole things from our kitchen. Every shed was broken into and things were taken. Children in that neighborhood have now been told by the police not to play outside. And he has been begging local officials to do something about it. Again, there was a gentleman there this week who was shot and killed at the very spot that we were standing. And talking to Arnie was interesting. And I heard this also from a number of other voters I spoke to on the ground who said, I don't want to be political. They said, I'm not really a political person, but the direction that our state has taken since Governor Walz got into office has forced my hand to where I feel like if I don't get political, no one's going to listen to me, and nothing will happen.
I think that that's absolutely true, and it is a pervasive feeling in Minnesota right now. How can we keep this guy? It's sort of a double-edged sword, because you don't want him in the White House, but you also don't want him in the governor's mansion. You know what I mean? But I think what was telling also what Arnie said is people are afraid to speak out. Yeah. And I think that is a nationwide problem. Yeah. And it was one of the things that inspired me to quit my job in sports is I saw people being afraid to speak, afraid to exercise their First Amendment rights. And I thought, okay, this is crazy. This is not the America I grew up in. I've got to be able to speak out.
Well, they're also afraid to be called a racist.
Well, that's a homophobe, or a xenophobe, or a transphobe, or whatever else the left wants to call it. Well, white supremacist,
but that is the entire template of the Kamala Harris agenda. There has never been a more recent administration that is more racist than she was literally, the administration was being sued by white farmers for unfairly not giving them portions of relief that they were overwhelmingly given. I think 50% went to 1% of black farmers, and the other 50% went to all the other farmers, which are mostly non-black. Right. They disparage people constantly on their race. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris openly selected people specifically for lifetime federal appointments on the Supreme Court and other federal judges based solely on their skin color and their gender.
Yes, no, there's no question about it.
Literally, I think under 15% were white men, even though it's 75% of all college graduates, law school graduates rather. They are the most racist, and they are specifically anti-white. And what they're doing right now with all the equity nonsense, it's a nice nice way of sitting there and saying, we are going to make sure that if you have a white son in this country and you're a woman, your son will absolutely be on the bottom of the ladder because of a benefit that you may never have inherited. You may have gone to this country 20 years ago from a family from somewhere in Europe or wherever. But this is the most racist administration of my lifetime.
And all of the talk about DEI hiring in the Biden administration, which a lot of the federal judge appointments have gone under the radar, where they've been slipping all these people in based on their race and gender. But again, it's important to point out, Kamala Harris was selected as Joe Biden's nominee. Kamala Harris is in this position because she is a black woman. That sounds harsh, but we know that is what happened. When Joe Biden was losing the 2020 primary, he had lost the first few states. In South Carolina, Jim Clyburn came to him and said, I will convince the Black Caucus to support you. You'll win South Carolina. We can arrange a plan with the DNC where Mayor Pete, who just spoke, Amy Klobuchar, who's speaking now, and others will drop out. They'll endorse you. But the deal is you have to pick a black woman to be your vice president. Joe Biden went along with it. That is the definition of a DEI hire.
Biden wanted Whitmer. That's who he wanted as his VP. He wanted either Klobuchar or Whitmer. And Klobuchar, after the BLM, stepped out of it and said, oh, no, I can't because Minnesota's just too hot of a subject right now. And the Obamas really heavily pushed Kamala, who had just burned out completely in her own presidential run.
But don't you think it's funny that there's this debate over whether or not it's bad to say that it was a DEI choice to choose Kamala, or, I've seen things that it's racist to say that. And what you just said, Cabot, is, well, we know that she was a DEI hire. We know that because Joe Biden said it on multiple occasions. Yeah. Like, maybe if they had played this differently from the beginning, I never understood that logic to go out and say, I chose it. He does it with the Supreme Court. He does it when he talks about Kamala.
Judges, yeah.
I chose her because I said I would choose a black woman. If you didn't say that from the beginning, if you had just said, I thought she was the best for the job, then maybe all of us sitting around here and tossing out that DEI claim, it would be harsh, but it's not harsh if he's been open about it.
If you put every law school graduate's name in a giant bucket and pull them at random, you would not have as many black women selected as you do right now, specifically because he is sitting there and telling black voters, you cannot abandon this party. They are racist, they are racist, they are racist. And you know what we'll do? Racism against white people. And that is what they've done with all the equity stuff, all the DEI stuff. It is specifically anyone but white men. And that
Except if you want to choose your vice president.
Well, true.
This white guy is okay.
Yes.
White guys are okay.
He's the one white guy.
They were on our short list.
He is the other DEI hire, ironically.
That's right.
Tim Walz.
I mean, we've been told that white men are the biggest danger to America. So then she said, well, I'll choose one as my vice president. Before we get too far afield on Tim Walz, by the way, I do want to bring up one other thing that is controversial about Tim Walz, and that is an interesting tie to China and the CCP. When he was a high school teacher, he went and he had a year to teach over in China. China is the place where he taught his kids in Nebraska, his high schoolers in Nebraska. It's communism, which is great because everyone is treated equally. The doctor and the construction worker are treated equally, and they all get a certain amount of food given to them. Yeah. They're all treated equally. Really, Tim? Tell that to the Muslim Uyghurs who are not treated equally. And then he went there and was lavished with gifts, with money that made him unequal to anyone else in China. So it's amazing. But he also took a bunch of high school kids over on trips. This is where it gets interesting because you can't just take a bunch of high schoolers over to China and say, get your visa, get your passport, let's go. There are arrangements that have to be made. Right. And this is where it gets interesting. What role did Tim Walz have that made the Chinese Communist Party so amenable to having him bring students over? Gordon Chang was on recently on Fox Business, and he, of course, an expert on China, and he had something to say about this.
This is an extremely serious matter because taking high school students to China for these trips would have had to be approved by the Communist Party's United Front Work Department. That's the part of the party that is in charge of subverting foreign governments. So this is obviously a very sensitive matter. And then when you add on to it that he may not have notified his superiors and finished all of the reporting requirements, that means that this is deeply, deeply suspicious.
Deeply suspicious. And this is a potential vice president of the United States. Again, are we going to have a tie to the Chinese Communist Party?
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be any less of a tie than we already have under the Biden administration with all the things that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden have done. We're going to get you guys to the floor now. One of Tim Walz's former students is speaking. Behind him are a number of former football players when Tim Walz was the defensive coordinator at a local high school there. And then we will get into Kamala's running mate, Tim Walz, speaking from Chicago.
A wonderful. Thanks very much.
Out here in the wide open spaces, we are reminded of the values we share.
All right, obviously playing a little intro video there. We won't make you guys watch all of that, but we will get you there the second he comes to the floor. Let's do a little prediction time, guys. First, what do we expect? How much of the speech will be talking about his life story? How many times will he mention being a teacher? How many times will he mention being a guardsman? How many times will he mention Trump compared
to
Kamala?
He's going to go after Trump and Vance the entire. Like I think that he's going to immediately go after Trump and Vance. And as far as his life story goes, I don't know. I mean, he's gonna talk about being a Midwesterner and a regular guy. Yeah. But I don't think you're going to hear a ton of his political experience. I think it's going to be more of his life, as they want people to see it.
Yeah, I think it's going to be similar to what Pete Buttigieg was talking about, which is how he makes you feel. Like, it's all about, this is all about feelings. We don't want to talk about record. We don't want to talk about how you handled COVID. We don't want to talk about your ties to China. We just want to keep it all about the vibes, man. So it's going to be a very vibey speech.
Walz is very energetic, and he is funny at times. So he's probably going to he'll probably be one of the better, I think he'll probably actually be a better speaker than Kamala.
Well, what's interesting, you see these pictures here of him with the football and this idea if he's the coach, right?
Right.
So coaches understand how to hype people up. That's what so much of coaching is, especially a defensive coordinator. That's what they do. It's about getting guys to run through brick walls for you. So, and in this case, in Tim Walz, brick walls. But, this is what I expect is a lot of the high energy, the smiling, the pointing to start with. And then, how he's just this Midwestern dad. And that's been the scheme all along.
Oh, and veterans. He'll talk about being a veteran nonstop.
But that's kind of part of my question for you, Michele, is that you talked with Liz Collin about what he's doing now, like when he comes out and he does these dances and he's very high energy and very happy. Forget the Midwestern thing. Obviously, they're going to play to that. The happy, joy, you said that's not what you saw when he was governor. So what was his personality like when when you saw him?
Just sort of benign. I mean, he is quite vociferous. He likes to talk. He is a good speaker, but you can't believe half of what he says. And that is the problem. And I think that's the heartbreaking thing about this. And people I talk to in Minnesota feel heartbroken about this, that everyone's just so willing to buy into this fabrication of him in spite of Tim Walz lies. And I think that's what's really difficult for all of us, that his image may be enough to get people to just go, I really like this guy.
I think one of the most striking examples of the power of the media, beyond the fact that they're not putting any pressure on Kamala to speak to the press, to hold any press conferences, it's the juxtaposition between the way that they covered the rollout of J.D. Vance. It was immediate. J.D. Vance is a radical. They were digging up every possible thing, now posting photos of him in high school, standing in the girls' bathroom, or the boys' bathroom where there were girls pretending to pee at the urinal, which I don't know why the left was mad about that, because I thought they want girls to be able to use the men's bathroom. And if J.D. Vance was posing in a high school bathroom today in Minnesota, there would be tampon dispensers on the wall for the boys there. But it's important to remember first, whoever Donald Trump had picked as vice president would have gotten the exact same reaction as J.D. Vance.
I worked for J.D. in 2022 for his Senate race, and there was, I mean, you could not be a more normal, down-to-earth, regular guy. He's so the opposite of that. But they, I mean, it was wall-to-wall coverage. By the way, led by Walz. He started the whole weird
Sorry to cut you off, Ryan. Tim Walz taking the stage right now. Let's head back to Chicago and the DNC.
Tim Walz.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you, first of all, to Vice President Harris. Thanks for putting your trust in me and for inviting me to be part of this incredible campaign. And a thank you to President Joe Biden for 4 years of strong, historic leadership. It's the honor of my life to accept your nomination for Vice President of the United States. We're all here tonight for one beautiful, simple reason. We love this country. So thank you to all of you here in Chicago and all of you watching at home tonight. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for your determination. And most of all, thank you for bringing the joy to this fight. Now, I grew up in Butte, Nebraska, a town of 400 people. I had 24 kids in my high school class, and none of them went to Yale. But I'll tell you what, growing up in a small town like that, you learn how to take care of each other. That family down the road, they may not think like you do. They may not pray like you do. They may not love like you do. But they're your neighbors. And you look out for them, and they look out for you. Everybody belongs, and everybody has a responsibility to contribute. For me, it was serving in the Army National Guard. I joined up 2 days after my 17th birthday, and I proudly wore our nation's uniform for 24 years. My dad, a Korean War era Army veteran, died of lung cancer a couple years later. He left behind a mountain of medical debt. Thank God for Social Security survivor benefits. And thank God for the GI Bill that allowed my dad and me to go to college, and millions of other Americans. Eventually, like the rest of my family, I fell in love with teaching. Three out of 4 of us married teachers. I wound up teaching social studies and coaching football at Mankato West High School. Go Scarlets! We ran a 44 defense. We played through to the whistle on every single play, and we even won a state championship. Never closed the yearbook, people. But it was those players and my students who inspired me to run for Congress. They saw in me what I had hoped to instill in them, a commitment to the common good, an understanding that we're all in this together, and the belief that a single person can make a real difference for their neighbors. So there I was, a 40-something high school teacher with little kids, 0 political experience, and no money, running in a deep red district. But you know what? Never underestimate a public school teacher. Never. I represented my neighbors in Congress for 12 years, and I learned an awful lot. I learned how to work across the aisle on issues like growing the rural economies and taking care of veterans. And I learned how to compromise without compromising my values. Then I came back to serve as governor, and we got right to work making a difference in our neighbors' lives. We cut taxes for the middle class. We passed paid family and medical leave. We invested in fighting crime and affordable housing. We cut the cost of prescription drugs and helped people escape the kind of medical debt that nearly sank my family. And we made sure that every kid in our state gets breakfast and lunch every day. So while other states were banning books from their schools, we were banishing hunger from ours. We also protected reproductive freedom because in Minnesota, we respect our neighbors and the personal choices they make. And even if we wouldn't make those same choices for ourselves, we've got a golden rule. Mind your own damn business. And that includes IVF and fertility treatments. And this is personal for Gwen and I. If you've never experienced the hell that is infertility, I guarantee you know somebody who has. And I can remember praying each night for a phone call, the pit in your stomach when the phone would ring, and the absolute agony when we heard the treatments hadn't worked. It took Gwen and I years, but we had access to fertility treatments. And when our daughter was born, we named her Hope. Hope, Gus, and Gwen, you are my entire world, and I love you. I'm letting you in on how we started a family because this is a big part about what this election is about. Freedom. When Republicans use the word freedom, They mean that the government should be free to invade your doctor's office. Corporations free to pollute your air and water. And banks free to take advantage of customers. But when we Democrats talk about freedom, we mean the freedom to make a better life for yourself and the people that you love. Freedom to make your own healthcare decisions. And yeah, your kids' freedom to go to school without worrying about being shot dead in the hall. Look, I know guns. I'm a veteran. I'm a hunter. And I was a better shot than most Republicans in Congress, and I got the trophies to prove it. But I'm also a dad. I believe in the Second Amendment, but I also believe our first responsibility is to keep our kids safe. That's what this is all about. The responsibility we have to our kids, to each other, and to the future that we're building together, in which everyone is free to build the kind of life they want. But not everyone has that same sense of responsibility. Some folks just don't understand what it takes to be a good neighbor. Take Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. Their Project 2025 will make things much, much harder for people who are just trying to live their lives. They spent a lot of time pretending they know nothing about this. But look, I coached high school football long enough to know, and trust me on this, when somebody takes the time to draw up a playbook, they're going to use it. And we know if these guys get back in the White House, they'll start jacking up the costs on the middle class. They'll repeal the Affordable Care Act. They'll gut Social Security and Medicare. And they will ban abortion across this country, with or without Congress. Here's the thing. It's an agenda nobody asked for. It's an agenda that serves nobody except the richest and the most extreme amongst us. And it's an agenda that does nothing for our neighbors in need. Is it weird? Absolutely. Absolutely. But it's also wrong. And it's dangerous. It's not just me saying so. It's Trump's own people. They were with him for 4 years. They're warning us that the next 4 years will be much, much worse. You know, when I was teaching every year, we'd elect a student body president. And you know what? Those teenagers could teach Donald Trump a hell of a lot about what a leader is. Leaders don't spend all day insulting people and blaming others. Leaders do the work. So I don't know about you. I'm ready to turn the page on these guys. So go ahead. Say it with me. We're not going back. We've got something better to offer the American people. It starts with our candidate, Kamala Harris. From her first day as a prosecutor, as a district attorney, as an attorney general, as a United States senator, and then our vice president, she's fought on the side of the American people. She's taken on the predators and fraudsters. She's taken down the transnational gangs, and she stood up to powerful corporate interests. She has never hesitated to reach across that aisle if it meant improving your lives. And she's always done it with energy, with passion, and with joy. Folks, we've got a chance to make Kamala Harris the next president of the United States. But I think we owe it to the American people to tell them exactly what she'd do as president before we ask them for their votes. So this is the part, clip and save it and send it to your undecided relatives so they know. If you're a middle-class family or a family trying to get into the middle class, Kamala Harris is going to cut your taxes. If you're getting squeezed by prescription drug prices, Kamala Harris is going to take on Big Pharma. If you're hoping to buy a home, Kamala Harris is going to help make it more affordable. And no matter who you are, Kamala Harris is going to stand up and fight for your freedom to live the life that you want to lead. Because that's what we want for ourselves, and it's what we want for our neighbors. You know, you might not know it, but I haven't given a lot of big speeches like this. But I have given a lot of pep talks. So let me finish with this, team. It's the fourth quarter. We're down a field goal, but we're on offense and we've got the ball. We're driving down the field. And boy, do we have the right team. Kamala Harris is tough. Kamala Harris is experienced, and Kamala Harris is ready. Our job for everyone watching is to get in the trenches and do the blocking and tackling. 1 inch at a time, 1 yard at a time, 1 phone call at a time, 1 door knock at a time, 1 $5 donation at a time. Look, we got 76 days. That's nothing. There'll be time to sleep when you're dead. We're going to leave it on the field. That's how we'll keep moving forward. That's how we'll turn the page on Donald Trump. That's how we'll build a country where workers come first. Healthcare and housing are human rights. And the government stays the hell out of your bedroom. That's how we make America a place where no child is left hungry, where no community is left behind, where nobody gets told they don't belong. That's how we're going to fight. And as the next president of the United States always says, when we fight, thank you. God bless.
All right, there you have it. That sigh of relief that you hear is the studio here saying, well, at least it didn't go until midnight the way Joe Biden's did. A very quick speech from Tim Walz. A lot to get to here, but Grace and then Ryan, initial reactions.
Initial reaction is that he's not a bad public speaker. I think he's able to deliver a speech, but it doesn't negate the fact that almost everything he just said was a lie. I do notice that Kamala Harris, and I think this is a trend with all of these speeches, and it does tell you a lot, she's an afterthought. She is not the main focal point of this. They really want to give everyone the good feelings, give everyone the joy without bringing up the elephant in the room, which is they've been in charge all this time. She's currently the vice president. She's tied to the worst parts of Biden's administration. And so that part for me, and we were discussing like how would a passive viewer watch this? And it's hard for all of us to imagine that. But that part to me would be really hard to get over. The part where I would just ask myself, wait, haven't these people been in charge? I don't know how now you can believe all these things he's telling you.
Yeah, I think that one, he is a talented speaker. I mean, what he did very well was when he said, "This is what Kamala Harris wants to do for you." His voice got much lower, which made you want to actually hear it. So he's a good speaker. I'm not going to knock him for that. It was weird that 24 years after Barack Obama said he had lived the American dream by able to go to an Ivy League school, he was knocked, not for him not going to an Ivy League school, and neither Kamala, because she couldn't get in, but none of the students he taught. He's like, none of my students went to Yale. That's what he said. Why would you say that? And that is not a flex. That is absolutely not a flex that none of your students went to Yale.
Well, because most of the students he taught were white. And
Curley couldn't get the TI initiative.
Well,
But anyway,
I don't know if he said it about his students or the people he went to high school with.
no, he said I had 24 students and none of them went to Yale.
Okay.
But
that was...
I heard
I'm
it
so glad you
It
brought
doesn't
that
matter.
up because that talking point, which he's been on MSNBC saying that, he
Right.
said that a lot. It infuriates me. And I did not go to Yale. So I'm saying
I
this to
dropped out of
someone...
community college, so it doesn't matter. But like,
It's
the
so
point-
rude.
But the point is that Barack Obama stood on that stage in 2008 saying, I was born to a single mother, able to go to Ivy League school. I was able to live the American dream.
The American dream.
That was his selling
That's
point.
what they continue
now,
to put
Now
down.
upward mobility, now success is actually a bad thing in their eyes.
Right.
Which you only believe if you believe, like to quote Thatcher, if you think that you can make people more equal, not by having everyone rise up, but by pressing the top down. That is his mindset. That's his worldview.
Grace, what did you make when he said that Vance isn't a real hillbilly because he went to Yale and that he knows real hillbillies and that Vance is not one?
Yeah, that was, I heard him say that recently on some network show, and I thought, it made me think of Michelle Obama's speech, which I also didn't think was bad. I think she's a talented speaker as well, where she said that
Well, you have to. It's the law. We all have to. We have to legally praise Michelle Obama.
Right.
Speeches all the time.
She said no one has a monopoly on what it means to be an American. And I thought, well, that's weird because not only Tim Walz, but so many Democrats are constantly using this line of, that's not who we are. If you do something wrong or if you have an issue with illegal immigration,
Right.
that's not who we are. We welcome everyone in. And so talking about J.D. Vance, he said, I know hillbillies, and that's not who they are. So he's not the right kind of hillbilly.
It's always that way. You're not the right kind of black. You're not the right kind of woman.
True.
You're not the right kind of this. If you don't fall into their worldview, you're not the right kind of fill in the blank.
Yeah, right.
So J.D.
Absolutely.
Vance is not the right kind of hillbilly because they don't like him.
Right.
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter that he worked his way out
And
of a
also-
hellish childhood and went to Yale.
Yeah, and Tim Walz, I mean, one of the many big glaring lies is he sits there and says, if you watch the video, by the way, it was all the rolling fields.
Yes.
It wasn't inner city Minneapolis.
No.
It's these rolling fields that he did not represent. He represented an Obama district Obama won, that's all he carried. He never represented this deep red district that he just sat there in this entire thing. And he's also lost so much ground with those exact voters that he's pretending he has this immense support with. I don't think that it's going to work. And I mean, literally all they are betting on is like this 2 or 3% of white men who voted Gary Johnson, Joe Biden, not to switch to Donald Trump this time. And that's the election in their eyes. And that's who his entire shtick is to.
There was another attempt to attach Project 2025 to the president. No. He called it the President's Project 2025. Oh, he's tried to disown it, but he can't. It's his playbook. You've got a playbook. You're going to use it. I've talked to people at the Heritage Foundation. They have told me what this is. I've looked at Project 25. It is not part of their playbook, the Trump-Vance playbook. It is what every party does coming in. They put out a menu of ideas. We'd love to see this happen. It is not a playbook.
It's also 900 pages long. Do you think that Donald Trump has read 900
No,
pages
I don't think any of them has read.
Oh, go ahead, Grace.
No, I was just going to say that when Ben Shapiro was in a congressional hearing about this, Eric Swalwell was asking him about Project 2025. What do you think of Project 2025? And bring it up. And he said, I think, and this was back when Joe was still, the Socratic guy in the background filling out equations. He was still going to run for president. The Wizard of Oz. And Ben Shapiro said, you think that if you say Project 2025, it's like Beetlejuice. If you say it enough times, it's going to revive this candidate. And they're still going with it. And it shows you how weak they think Kamala Harris is as a candidate, because most people don't want to hear about this random policy thing.
But they would not be saying it if it is not making something.
I don't know about that. I don't see normal people talking about it.
I had a teenager who's a relative of mine, asked me about it, and he does not watch the news. And he sat there and he said, I saw it on TikTok.
For what it's worth,
I mean, I'm telling you, it
Harry's
is being mentioned for quite a bit.
For what it's worth, I had a liberal family member reach out, say the same thing. They saw on TikTok Project 2025. My barber recently said, I don't know much about politics. This 2025 stuff is scary.
Yeah.
I do think that people are being scared by it. I would encourage our viewers at home to go to project2025.com. Project2025.com. Get a little surprise from the Daily Wire over there. You might be laughing at that. One ironic moment that jumped out to me is when Walz said, the students that I taught who were running for student body president, they could teach Donald Trump a thing or two. And that's ironic because Kamala Harris is campaigning like a student running for student government president.
Yeah.
She's saying, we'll get you vending machines in the cafeteria. We'll get you free, extra recess. We'll get you free snacks and pool time. That is the ironic part.
I'm glad you brought that up because you just reminded me. He emphasized, Tim Walz, so much about we're giving every kid a free lunch and a free breakfast. What you're not giving them is a public education that's worth a darn. We have 50% of Minnesota kids unable to read or do math at grade level. So no matter how much you feed them, you're not feeding them knowledge.
Under Walz, they didn't even have a public education for 2 years because he kept them out of school.
Yep, that is.
Like, he was responsible for generational learning loss.
Yeah.
I mean, truly generational. For a teacher, quote unquote teacher who cares about education, no one on earth suffered more than a child living in a blue state during COVID. Truly, not even, nobody suffered more than a child in a blue state who went through isolation, mass isolation, learning loss, no sports, no extracurricular activities, no friends, no grandparents in many places. Traumatic thing that they will be living with for probably their entire life because of people like Tim Walz.
And that's so important because when you were doing the piece with people who are being affected, who said, I don't want to get political, but now the politics is kind of affecting my life. I noticed that during COVID, and that's why I think it's so interesting. They chose someone with so many failures on that front because COVID was one of those situations where people who would love nothing more than to stay out of it and keep their mouths shut and not post on Facebook or not get involved and just let life go by. It affected their kids. It affected their businesses. And that's 2 times where people who choose typically to stay out of politics say, I have no choice. I didn't want to get involved, but now I have to because now you're affecting my kids and you're affecting my business and you're affecting my family. And so I think the fact that he has failed so abysmally on that front is going to resonate with people and say, maybe I don't want this on the national scale.
Yeah, well, a lot happened tonight. It was a lot of fun, guys. We have a lot more coming tomorrow night as well. We will get the chance to hear from Mr. Ben Shapiro himself, who'll be joining us right after Kamala Harris's keynote address to give his live reaction. Michael Knowles will be here in studio the entire time. It's going to be a lot of fun, and we had a lot of fun tonight. Guys, thank you so much for being here. Grace Curley, Ryan James Girdusky, my wonderful co-host Michele Tafoya. Guys,
thank you.
We are going to send it off. Thank you for joining us here on Election Wire DNC Edition. I'm your host, Cabot Phillips. We'll see you guys tomorrow night.